Hey everyone, it's a DevOps kind of Monday today here. We've got a lot of DevOps news to go over to you and to go over with you. And then Mitchell and I are going to tell you about what we did on our field trip. All that and more on Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. As I said, it's a DevOps kind of Monday here on Techstrong Gang. And when we're talking DevOps, we've got some great DevOps people to talk to you about it. Let me introduce you to who we have on the gang today. Back from our field trip out to Silicon Valley, Mitchell Ashley's joining us from home high atop the Rocky Mountains in Denver. Mitchell, good to have you back.
Good to be here. Good to be back in Colorado.
Absolutely. And then from Colorado, hopping nearby over to New Mexico, though it looks like a little different. Are you home in New Mexico or not? I'm not sure. Tracy.
I am home.
It's Tracy.
I am home in New Mexico today.
Good for you.
Just moving around the rooms.
Looks like, yeah, or it's a, who knows, in today's world of
I don't have my Silicon Valley background on. I have my Santa Fe look on today.
Okay, well, go Santa Fe. Go Santa Fe. Tracy, thanks for joining with us. I feel like I haven't seen you on here in a while. We were missing
I know. I was missing you guys, too. I was glad to see the invite come through. I'm so happy to be here. It's always fun.
Always good stuff. And then joining Mitchell and Tracy and I, he's been holding the fort down here all week, I guess, in our Boca headquarters. It's our Chief Content Officer and Yankee Stadium Bronx native, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike.
Hello. Good
to see you. Yankees are on a hell of a tear.
They are. Welcome back. But the Rangers are a cause for concern.
Well, it's 3-2.
Yeah, let's not get into hockey right now. That'll take me on a tangent and we'll go a long way. I'm still upset about the Rangers right now.
Yeah, it's been, look, the Rangers are the Rangers.
I don't know. I think Tracy can write the DevOps hockey manifesto. Is that what you're going
I probably could. I watch a lot of hockey. I'm going for Edmonton this year, though. I want to see a Canadian team go to the Stanley Cup. Yeah, I think it would be awesome.
Interesting. Edmonton hasn't been relevant since Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky were on.
It would be amazing to see them back in the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. But let's talk, Mike. We've got some DevOps news to go over today.
So there was at least I found it a bit surprising move, but maybe it's the natural order of things. But JFrog aligned with GitHub on this broad alliance and covers everything from how you're going to connect and provide linkage across your DevOps workflows from the source code sitting over in GitHub all the way over to the JFrog platform where we deal with the binaries. And on that level, it makes a lot of sense. And also, they're going to share some of their AI technologies, and folks will wind up using the GitHub copilots in the JFrog environments and kind of use that to help manage back and forth. I'm sure JFrog will have its own agents as well, and there'll be handoffs between these things. But what's your take on this? You've been looking at these companies for a long time.
You want to know my real take on it? Nothing would, and JFrog's a public company and doing fairly well in the markets. They've made their numbers. Shlomi and the team there run a profitable business that's doing well. Would they like to be part of Microsoft, GitHub, or Azure? You betcha. And I don't have any inside knowledge of this or anything, but to me, this clearly aligns. I think we're seeing battle lines being drawn up, right? Where you have ecosystems and AI is yet one other place where they will come together. But, they all want to play nice. I mean, JFrog still has to play nice with AWS and GCP and all of that. But clearly, it's appealing to deal with GitHub, who has a rich uncle. And, and everybody wants the rich uncle. Now, on the other hand, GitHub, has been on a mission for years and years now to be much more than a repo. They want to be, GitHub pipelines. They want to be a CI/CD player, and they're GitHub. And, their CI/CD offering is probably not as good as, let's say, a GitLab. And so they could use and benefit from some of the JFrog maturity, especially around security, right? JFrog's made a big bet in security. So I see, both of these folks have a scratch to itch, or an itch to scratch, excuse me, and they mutually scratch each other.
Tracy, do you see the same thing? Is this the beginning of some sort of elaborate courtship?
I would suspect so. We're in a kind of one of those flexes Alan was talking about, and we see a lot of disruption in the market right now, a lot of changes. DevOps in particular, as I keep saying, has lost its shiny edge. I'm hoping that we can bring it back because there's so much more to do in the space. But on this particular offering, there is something that I found interesting, which is the ability to connect. And you would think that this already exists, but it doesn't. The ability to connect a repo to an artifact. So if you have an artifact in JFrog, you don't know what repo it came from. Now, my preference would be that the Linux Foundation and SPDX would start capturing the GitHub repo and put it in the SBOM. That would be really, really awesome. But from a technical point of view, if there could be a connection between the repo and the JFrog between the source code repo and artifact repo, that would be super helpful. At least it would be to deploy Hub. We've been looking for something like this for some time. So just from that perspective, they're solving an interesting problem in the market. However, I do think that, as Alan put it, it's nice to have a rich uncle, and there's a lot more to be done in this space. GitHub could go a lot farther than they've currently gone in the DevOps space, just in actions. So I think it'll be interesting, and it's something to watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if GitHub purchased JFrog down the road. Wouldn't surprise me a bit.
Mitchell, for sake of argument, I will say that this is really an alliance between two companies that have incomplete offerings, and just kind of highlights what the other guys are doing better, right? So GitLab, to your point, and even the folks over at CloudBees with their new platform, they have a more complete solution. So is this just kind of, two companies coming together in an alliance that is maybe signals some weaknesses? What are your thoughts?
You said the magic word, platform, right? This is part of that march that moved to platforms and expanding out on interconnection. And Tracy hit it right on the head with what's unique about these two companies. Yes, it's Microsoft with GitHub, but it's not Microsoft directly. It's GitHub, the subsidiary or whatever. But with code repository and artifactory, right? That isn't something you have in many other organizations that are going to partner together. So that interconnection makes a lot of sense. I think it makes a lot of sense for JFrog because they get advantage of, they can tie into the pipelines and the GitHub actions that are being developed there and help round out what's happening there. So is it incomplete? I think it's more kind of how do they fit together? And there's a nice linkage between the two, a natural fit. They don't overlap and compete much in that way. So it makes a lot, and it also, they aren't partnering, JFrog isn't partnering with Azure, they're partnering with GitHub. So it keeps at least one level of distance between themselves and competing with, other cloud environments with AWS and GCP.
I've always thought that GitHub needed a binary repository. I didn't understand why, we can certainly use Git in any way you want, but there's additional features around binary repositories that Git never offered. So I think that this is the time for them to do it because things are shifting so much. But I do have to say that it would be nice to see new innovation, not just integrations. There are many problems to be solved right now in DevOps and security and connecting these dots and connecting a vulnerability all the way out to your production environments. And I feel like we should be innovating more. And I'm hoping that JFrog and GitHub, if they do come together as a complete solution, will innovate around the space and not just integrate. So that's my wish.
So I don't think you underestimate JFrog's a DevSecOps provider, a security play. They have been. Other than this news, look at their news over the last year, 2 years. 80% of it is security related. I think that is a huge thing that GitHub wants in on is that, security within your CI/CD pipeline. Look, just because they're hanging out together doesn't mean they're getting married necessarily right now. I think the other thing to look at is, okay, now with these two sort of, working together, what does that mean for CloudBees, GitLab, Harness, some of the other big CI/CD platforms, right? I was citing that kind of segues into our second story where we're going to talk about Harness recently made an acquisition. What does it mean for Google Cloud, GCP?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think as we move into this AI era that we are going to see all these different companies and mergers and acquisitions in a wave driven by, to Mitch's point, the desire to create a platform that is AI infused and, all bets are off because we're going to reinvent the platform as we know it?
I think there is part of that. I think another part of it is with AI is going to render a lot of companies in the ecosystem. It's going to take away the barriers to entry for a lot of these companies, and not just in CI/CD, but in observability. A lot of the different areas that we play in here. It's going to be a lot easier, let's say for a Google, using some AI technology to quickly beef up their platform around these things. They may not need to do a partnership or a huge acquisition of a public company like this. A lesson I learned, Brad Feld always said, is you want to be in the top 3. If you're not in the top 3, get out. And when markets consolidate like this, it's the top 3 people who make out, right? They get great multiples. They have great financial outcomes for their shareholders. If you're not in those top 3, you don't get as great a return. And what we could be seeing here is the beginning of as Humphrey Bogart would say, a beautiful friendship, Louis.
Yeah. Tracy, to Alan's point, does AI help the startup more or does it help the incumbent more?
Well, if you're a startup and you're not talking AI, you're probably not going to be a startup for long. Let's just put it that way. But I don't, first of all, as a small company, it is hard right now to recruit and find people who are really solid in really understanding large language models and being able to put this stuff to work. So there's going to be yet some time before startups that are not heavily funded that can bring on somebody at $250,000 for a developer that's in this space before they can really start leveraging the technology. And as I always say, in our space, in the DevOps space, we don't have a good large language model to pull from. Copilot has data, but not about a lot of data about source code, but very little data about what's coming through the supply chain. How production environments are being impacted. So, from my perspective, when I'm looking at AI in the DevOps space, I think we have a long way to go. Now, in other industries, I think that AI will push startups because it's created a brand new economy, right? We have a whole AI economy. But eventually, I think we had this discussion once before. It's not going to be a product. It's going to become a feature. So I think we're going to get to that pretty quick.
I was going to say if we get to the point with AI generated code where we can really give it some hefty challenges, problems, it can eliminate barriers to entry into market, right? If let's say I want to go after the same market that this company that just came out with a product. Maybe it's a startup, so it's an early addition to that. How quickly can I develop my own capability, either into my existing code or creating a new product? If I can create code really fast, and I can close the gap in a much shorter period of time, I think that's what we're all wondering about. when is AI going to be able to help us do that, and what's the impact when it does?
Yeah, we're close. We're close now. There's a lot you can do right now with what you have. We code a lot faster now than we used to. But that doesn't mean you still have to have somebody who understands the space and understands the problem set and can use the tools. It just helps you generate them.
I think the key thing that a lot of people are overlooking with AI is not so much whether I'm going to write code faster, but I can reduce the time it takes to switch from one platform to the other. So the cost of switching is going to drop considerably as I re-engineer a language that's some proprietary thing into something more common or whatever it is. But Mitch, last question on this. I want to put your CTO hat on for a minute. You know, are you waking up in the morning with a sense of agita because you're kind of worried that, you know, the people and the companies you bet on to provide the platforms that you based all your decisions on might suddenly, you know, be part of something else the next morning, and you don't know exactly where you feel or if there's any stability in the market right now?
Welcome to my world for the past 30 years. Yes, that's just a fact of life. And especially when you find something really interesting, you know, when I discovered Slack, like, oh, this is a great thing. Did I know it's going to get bought by Salesforce? And would I have been happy about that? Would I have selected it? I don't know, but it's just part of it. You know, you could pick any number of tools that we use today, and they're going to be swooped up or replaced by something else down the road. And you may be, you know, kind of strange bedfellows with a vendor you didn't really plan to be working with, and now you are. It's just a fact of life we deal with.
Absolutely. Hey, we got to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about more deals going on. I kind of let the cat out of the bag. Harness made an acquisition. We're going to talk about that. But first, we're gonna pay some bills here and do a quick break here on Techstrong Gang. We'll be back with Mitchell, Tracy, and Mike in just a minute.
Cloud Native Now is the web's leading resource for the growing cloud native ecosystem. CloudNativeNow.com is your destination for news, thought leadership, features, and webinars on cloud native architecture, Kubernetes, serverless, cloud native application development, microservices, service mesh, cloud native security, and more. Stay on the cutting edge of modern application development at Cloud Native Now.
Hello and welcome back. And as previously indicated, we are talking about an acquisition Harness made of a company called Split Software. They provide feature management tools is one way of thinking about it. Of course, you know, the idea of features has been around forever. We've been using it for A/B testing and those kinds of things within DevOps, but now people are using this stuff in production environments to provide different classes of user experiences, because now I can direct different capabilities to different users and charge them different price points. Seems like this whole space got a jump with the rise of digital transformation, but let's start with Tracy. What's your sense of this deal in particular, and where are we with the maturity of feature management?
Well, first of all, I think that Harness, we used the term platform in our previous session, and I think that Harness is building a platform. Feature management was a hole in their offering, and they needed to fill it. And I'm super happy for the company, for Split Software, for getting acquired by them. It's a really great fit. You know, I have not, to be honest, I have not played a lot with feature management. Some companies really embrace it, but I don't believe it's really gotten as much attention as it's worth, particularly in a SaaS environment. In the SaaS environment, there's a struggle with monetizing features, and feature management tools in a SaaS environment could be super, super useful. I don't necessarily know if in a traditional, you know, where you're downloading software, how useful feature management is, but it does have an important place. I find it interesting that it's in the DevOps space as opposed to being in the kind of the ops and management of feature space where you're charging and you're tracking who's using what. And I think that's really where it's most useful. I know we've looked at it for Deploy Hub to say, you know, we can turn features on and off depending on who's logged in, which would be super useful. It's kind of SaaSifying as an option for using features. It was started just for testing, right? We were using it to test features in production, but I think that it has a bigger story to it. And I think Harness made a good decision in I guess, increasing its features around its platform.
It seems to me there's a lot of companies providing this kind of capability, but for lack of a better term, I mean, is features management a feature of a platform, or is it a standalone kind of company?
Look, everything eventually becomes a feature, right? No pun intended here with feature management. That's just the way of the world that I've lived in for the 25, 30 years. I think, excuse me, you looked at this move by Harness. Remember, Harness is a Jody Bonsai company, right? Jody's the founder of App Dynamics, sold it to Cisco. Founded Harness, he's founded Traceable AI. He knows what he's doing. And what you got here is, I think, as Tracy mentioned, Harness is building a next-gen platform for CI/CD and software pipelines. They saw features management as a feature of that platform, and they made a build versus buy decision. And in today's market, where valuations are a little bit more reasonable, and remember, Harness isn't public, but they just raised some money, and they have their Jody has all this equity there based upon their last raise, but it's not a real market. It's not like a public company where I could say their stock's worth $40 a share. They could say their stock's worth whatever they want to say it's worth. The question is whether you believe them or not.
$1 billion.
I think they're probably raised at a couple billion. But then he could use that stock as currency. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was a deal that used a lot of stock as currency, and it was a build versus buy. They made a buy. They had equity to burn. And good for them. This is what smart CEOs and entrepreneurs do.
Tracy, to our last conversation, we didn't really talk about the role venture capitalists play in this dynamic, but it seems like a lot of the times the currency that Alan's talking about is, quote unquote, funny money between the VCs being exchanged for shares and stocks. And how much does that impact these mergers and acquisitions?
I don't really understand the venture capital space as well as I should, and it has changed. VCs have changed so much over the last 4 or 5 years. It's not the same VCs that we knew, before COVID, let's just say. But in the case of what Al was pointing out, if I was Split Software, if Deploy Hub, if Harness came to Deploy Hub right now and said, we want to invest in you. We're going to do a pure stock exchange. We'll trade stocks. We're going to take over yours. We're going to give you a bunch. I would think it would be an amazing deal because I believe in Harness, right? As Alan said, Jody really does know what he's doing. This was a smart buy for him. But in the VC world right now, I'm not really, I haven't seen anybody really interested in the DevOps space because everybody's talking about AI, and stocks have nothing to do with it. It is pure who's gonna win in these particular spaces, and everybody's running kind of crazy trying to come up with the next AI tool. And there's a ton of the startups out there. You look at what they're doing, and sometimes I have no clue what they're up to. So I can't really answer that question, but I can tell you that talking to some VCs as of late, it's like if you don't have AI on your slide deck, they don't want to talk to you because that's all they're interested in. And some of the investments I've seen are a little odd. It's definitely not the same market as it was in, let's say, 2017, 2018. It's changed a lot.
All right. In Harness dollars we trust.
Yes,
Hey,
I would think
Mitchell.
so. From our perspective, that would be a good deal to become part of the Harness family and own some of their stocks.
Features management, Mitch, has been around since, I think, the 70s. I think you've had some experience with it, or at least, been able to play with it from here to there. What is the current state of this stuff? Because I kind of do scratch my head. I go, wow, this is pretty cool. But then to Tracy's point, it's undervalued and people don't seem to know what to do with it. Is it hard? I mean, why isn't this more pervasive?
Well, if you've done feature management to any extent, you find out very quickly, you get past about the third or fourth or fifth feature you're flagging and turning on off and on. You get into 20, 30, 50 features. It gets very complex very fast. what each one of those does, what code it affects, what functionality it delivers. So having a management capability, I think, is a valuable thing to have if you're really bought into feature management. I think feature is a misnomer. It was feature. We used it back in still secure days to enable features, functionality. But I think it's really functions in some way, because you can deliver software very quickly, you may deliver code into production you're not really using, and so you turn it off. You can do that with feature management kind of platform. I'm gonna take a flyer here. I'm guessing, I don't have any inside information. If I'm building a platform, one of the features or capabilities I think I want for my own platform, feature management. I think they bought them for as much as use in their own product, as well as to fill in a capability of what they offer their customers. So I think if that's the case, they got double their money worth of what they paid for it.
It's a smart deal then. You're right.
Last question. Do you think that AI is the missing component in features management? Because to Mitch's point, it's complex to manage all these things. So if I can reduce the complexity of managing it, maybe more people will use it.
It's not missing no more. AI is AI part of that. AI is a part of everything. Is it, I feel like if I went on Jeopardy and just answered every question with what is AI, I'd win. But clearly it'll help. Can you do it without AI? Yeah. Will AI make it easier? Perhaps. Yeah. Anyway, good luck. Congratulations to the people at Split. Congratulations to all of our friends at Harness. This again should be a beautiful friendship. Louis, right, for taking a line from Casablanca. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about what the heck is a Tech Field Day anyway. So, as I intimated earlier in the show, Mitchell and I were off on a trip to Santa Clara this week, where we were delegates at the inaugural App Dev Tech Field Day. We had a blast. We're both back in our respective home areas now, but what the heck is a Tech Field Day? Mitch, why don't you go first?
It's an interesting concept. I think you and I both kind of went, why didn't we think of that? It's something that Stephen Boskett set up as part of the part of that Tech Field Day team, which is part of Future M Group. Essentially what it is let's bring a group of diverse kind of experts in their respective areas and have a technology company present to them for about an hour and a half, walking through what they do, what the product is, the problems that they solve. But it's all live streamed. So it's kind of like a giant briefing with, hopefully people that will ask some pretty smart questions. Sometimes I'm not sure the questions I always ask are that smart, but we all try. And it's really about eliciting of what does this product do and how are we using it and what are you seeing in market? And then there's some kind of alone time, downtime where we're not on camera, where we can talk about some things more openly that they might share with us that they're not going to say on a streaming video. So it's a chance for us to get a deeper look at some of this and hear from kind of others in our peer groups, et cetera. But it's also a time to kind of really dialogue with the technology company. And we did 3 companies while we were out there. I'll let you talk about it, who they were. We can get into a little bit of that, but I think, is that a pretty fair description, Alan?
Absolutely. Let me add a little color commentary there. So Stephen Foskett is the founder of the Tech Field Day program. He's been doing it about 15 years. So he's been doing this a while. A lot of them are done out in Santa Clara, Silicon Valley, but he does them also around existing, piggybacking like an existing show and stuff. And he does them on a variety of different subjects within tech, right? This was the first app dev one, but he's done them on many. The premise is that each company, as Mitch said, gets this 90-minute window. What they do with it, I mean, they could perform circus tricks. It's up to them. And then the delegates sit around and they listen, they question, they comment, and anything is fair game. And there is an off-camera element where you get to speak, sort of off-camera, off the record, if you will, with the vendor. I think what makes it really nice, though, is number one, most of the vendors are the three that we saw. Well, Google Cloud was one of them, and they didn't have their CEO there. But the other two vendors were Mesmo and Catchpoint, and they both were represented by their CEO. So you had a chance to really talk to their CEO and hear him talk about his vision. In this case, they were both hims. Talk about their vision for the company. I asked Stephen, and full disclosure, right? Tech Field Day was acquired by Futurum. I think it closed in April. So, and we've signed an LOI with Futurum, and so we're almost hopefully going to be sister companies or sister units within Futurum, and we're going to work a lot more with Stephen and the Tech Field Day team. We actually streamed it on the Techstrong TV platform, and we will be streaming all future Tech Field Days on Techstrong TV platform. We'll also be doing the Tech Field Day podcast on our Techstrong TV platform, as well as a lot of the content stuff that they did over there, because the parent company for Tech Field Day was Gestalt IT, and you'll be seeing a lot. We'll be working closely with them, and more details to come on that.
So far I got reality TV show for IT, and can I get voted off this island, or how does that work?
You can get voted off the island, but and to be fair, look, those vendors are paying money. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want to vote them off if they're writing checks, but anyway, but you could certainly tell them, I think your messaging is off. I think your product's not good. I mean, you can tell them whatever you want. The way Stephen explains it is he figured out almost like how to do an event, a conference event without having a conference expo floor, without a lot of the nonsense. But, you get these companies presenting from high level folks to what you hope is an intelligent delegate representation, asking the questions that the people out in the world want to know. It's streamed live, and then it's available on YouTube or Techstrong TV in this case. And he's been doing it 15 years. People like it.
Yeah, and the important thing is anybody can watch this. I mean, the delegates are there, but everybody can see what's going on.
It. Anybody can watch it. You don't even have to register. They don't know your name. You could be, you could be a dog on the internet and watch it.
Yeah. Tracy, sounds attractive. What do you think?
I really have been waiting for a disruption in the trade show space. I am really tired of expo floors and breakout sessions. Maybe it's just the time I've been in the industry. This format sounds far more interesting, to be quite honest. It seems more honest and more productive. I would be very interested in doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, Mitch, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the two-way part of this is something that is underestimated. It's one thing to go to the trade floor and have the people speak at you, when you're watching the demo sitting down, or you try to go get a one-on-one and you get, maybe 5 minutes if you're lucky. The two-way part of this dialogue, you learn as much from the questions that people ask. I would have asked that question too. So I think that's a real positive. It's an evolution. You talk about disruption of the trade show. It's got some other benefits, I think.
I tell you, one of the things I really like too is besides the on time with in this case, 3 different vendors over the 2 days, the downtime with the other delegates. We went out to dinner, we had lunch together, we hung out a bunch, met some really interesting people. they're a good mix of analysts and practitioners and authors and trainers and influencers, and they had people from a sales background, a marketing background, and engineering background, and there was a real camaraderie there that you develop over the time. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to doing it. I think they're going to do another app dev one during KubeCon, Tracy. At Salt Lake City, we're going to try to do it. And, and if you get a chance, as I said, it's on YouTube, it's on Techstrong TV. Go check it out. It was a lot of fun. I should mention, too, that of the 3 companies that presented, I wrote an article. It's on Cloud Native now, with a lot of help from our editors, on Google Cloud presented about, was it Google Cloud Run, right, Mitch?
Yeah, Google Run.
Google Run versus Google GKE. And then I also wrote an article, I think it's up on devops.com today, or maybe it went up yesterday already.
Yesterday.
On
it was last week by the time you see this.
Right, last week was Catchpoint. And that was good. I really, we've known the Catchpoint people. I've interviewed Mehdi, their CEO, before, but I really, truly understand where they are and where they're going. And then Mitch, you had the one on Mesmo, right?
Yes, it's going to be up, I think, on Monday, so it'll go up.
So it's probably up there as people watch this.
I'm not sure, to Tracy's point, that this is going to replace the trade show, though, because, well, there's no attractive person scanning your badge and handing you,
Right, that's why
swag.
we go to No, there was swag.
Swag?
There was swag. The vendors left swag at our table for the delegates and stuff. I brought my wife home a nice, a little cup that she could fill with her beverage of choice on the boat. So it was all good. And actually, the delegates do like a grab bag. What do they call it? A Yankee gift?
Yankee gift exchange, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But
I want to say, Alan, too, if there are any companies that are interested in participating in this, we'll have the videos up first part of next week so you can get an idea of the format. But if there are any folks that are interested, would like to be one of the companies featured on this, just reach out to Alan or myself. We'll be glad to get you in touch with the right
Absolutely. Folks. And I'll tell you, 2 of Mesmo and Catchpoint CEOs reached out to me privately on LinkedIn. I saw it on my way home last night on the plane, to say they had a great time. They'd like to do it again, and they wanted to talk to me about some other things anyway. But it's an intimate, great environment to learn about what these companies are really doing, and also helping them kind of sharpen it too, to sharpen their thing. And just quickly, self-serving, as we continue down the road with this Futurum Group, merger, I see a very tight integration between Stephen and the Tech Field Day stuff and what we do here, because they need the distribution, I think, that Techstrong brings to it. We could help each other a lot. There's a lot of pieces. I mean, Paul Nashawati, who's the Futurum Group analyst on DevOps, was there doing, what's it called, DevOps Dialogue, which is kind of his podcast thing on YouTube. So we had a chance to spend some quality time with Paul. There's a lot of goodness all around there. I had a great time. I mean, I highly recommend it. Check out the videos, Tech Field Day. It's good stuff.
All right, sounds good. And can we vote for delegates in the future? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe that's something we could do. We could vote. Now, you can be a convicted felon and be a delegate. Oh, well, we're not going there. Sorry.
No slates of fake delegates either. You
Yeah,
can't.
no, I'm not going. I'm sorry, we're not going there. Actually, I do have an announcement though. Starting, I think it's June 20th, which is a Monday. Big news here at Techstrong. We're moving Techstrong TV and the Techstrong gang to 5 days a week. Now, we've always been on 5 days a week, not Saturday and Sunday, obviously. But usually 2 of those days, on Friday and Wednesday, we would do best of repeat shows. Where, there's so much going on in the tech world, and a lot of it's driven by AI, certainly. And we have so much more content with our friends from Futurum Group, like Tech Field Day and Paul Nashawati. And we've had Lisa Martin on and Steve Dickens and the infrastructure. I forget what they call that.
Infrastructure Matters podcast.
Infrastructure Matters podcast. And 6.5 Media. We have a lot more content. So our aim is to go 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. And it's ambitious. Our AV people are breaking under the strain, but they'll get up to speed and they get used to it. They're long distance runners. So stay tuned for that later this month. And really, we hope you enjoy this. We'd love to hear from you about what we're doing.
Someday we might even have a live studio audience.
You know what? That would be great. Like, I would like to do the David Letterman Theater in New York City. Would be a personal thing for me, but I don't know. Or we could all go to Albuquerque.
I think you should do a wait, don't tell me style.
There you go. See, future
Yeah.
cities.
Go to Chicago and do
we
wait,
could do that.
just don't tell me. I love that show. I listen to it all the time.
Denver, Colorado.
We could be like the NFL draft, city to city. Anyway, I think that's going to end our text. We got a little loopy there today. I tried it at 1 a.m. last night, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this Techstrong gang. We will be back tomorrow with all new, fresh content and more gang members on here. But until then, on behalf of Tracy Reagan, Mitch Ashley, Mike Vizard, and myself, Alan Schimmel, have a great day. Stay tuned for the rest of Techstrong TV today.
Bye.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm happy to have, it's actually his first time on Techstrong TV here, so let's welcome him. Patrick Joyce. Patrick is the global resident CISO over at Proofpoint. Hey, Patrick, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's nice to have you on.
Hey, Alan, it's happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure. So, Patrick, the way we do things here is I always like to kind of let our audience get an idea of who it is that they're talking to or who's talking to them, more accurately. Why don't you give kind of folks a bit of your journey and how you got here today?
Oh, one of those convoluted journey stories. Well, great. Yeah, I've been with Proofpoint actually less than a year. I joined last fall in this role. I've just spent the last 18 years at Medtronic, world's largest med tech company. I was the CSO and the CISO for the company for the past 10 years. So I had a combined role of physical security, cybersecurity, did some stints in there of product security and privacy and audit and other things like that as well. So spent a long time there in that role, built a great team and worked for a great organization. Happy now, though, to be with Proofpoint as the global resident CISO. And what that really means is I describe it as I'm Switzerland. I live between the customer CISOs and provide advisory services and support and assistance and mentoring in some cases to them and listen to what their needs are. And then I help translate that back to our product and marketing and communications teams so they understand what a CISO needs. So I bring perspective to Proofpoint from the field of being a CISO and having lived in that role. So it's really a fun role. I get to do interesting stuff every day.
Sounds like good. You know what? I always tell people, if you got to get up to work every day, you got the wrong job, right? You got to kind of be excited and love what you're doing.
Exactly.
Patrick, Proofpoint's been around a bit. I mean, I've been in cyber for a long time in the industry here as an entrepreneur and now media person the last 10 years. But not everyone out here knows Proofpoint. I mean, there's so many security companies. Who can blame them? For people maybe who have heard the name or haven't heard the name, but in any event, not sure what Proofpoint does, how would you describe Proofpoint to folks?
Yeah, well, it's a great organization, and I was fortunate to be a customer of Proofpoint and then also serve on their customer advisory board for the last 5 years. So I got to know them pretty well. Proofpoint is one of the largest security companies out there. Been around for a lot of years. Has grown significantly. A couple stats that you might find interesting. So for those that don't know who we are, we protect, frankly, the world's email. Our focus is on being very human-centric, protecting people and the vulnerabilities to people through email and other activities, and then defending the other side of the house, which is the data being data-centric and focusing heavily on making sure that the sensitive data stays within organizations and all the other activities in between that. So just an interesting stat, Proofpoint protects, I think the number right now is 86 or 88% of the Fortune 100 email. And I think somewhere in the area of 68 to 70% of the Fortune 1000 email. So that's a significant volume of very sensitive data flowing through our platforms literally every second of every day.
Sure is. Sure is. I mean, look, an email, it's funny, they've been predicting the demise of email forever, and it's still the best communication. You know, I use Slack, I use other, WhatsApps and WhatsApp use, and messaging, but I'm still an email person, as I think many, many folks are.
Yeah, we're showing our age a little bit, Alan, in that regard. And sure, you're right. There's a lot of other platforms out there, but those other platforms have vulnerabilities too, right? So trying to find the right method by which to communicate in the right context and sequence. I use things like Teams. I use things, obviously, email. I use other types of messaging. But when you think about it, different messaging platforms serve different needs. So yeah, email is going to always be there.
Absolutely. All right. And just before we jump into our topic of discussion, is it proofpoint.com is the URL?
It is.
All right. So if people want to go find out more about Proofpoint, there you go. All right. Topic of discussion is Proofpoint's 2024 Voice of the CISO report. And if it's the 2024 report, I imagine this has been an ongoing annual type of report. I guess we should start there, Patrick. How many years has Proofpoint been doing this, if you know?
Well, I'm going to have to think for a second, but I know all the way back at least to 2022, if not 2021. I think is when it started.
So it's a good couple of years.
It's been a good few years, all during the pandemic as well. The numbers have grown significantly, though, in terms of the survey. I mean, this year we surveyed 1,600 CISOs across 16 countries. So we really got a good spread of perspectives and beliefs around what CISOs are really dealing with every day.
Excellent. So, when we deal with reports and surveys and so forth like this, I always like to ask, what are the three key takeaways here?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting when you look at, and it's kind of fun to go back through and do some comparisons of year over year of how perception and beliefs and concerns are changing. I'd say the number one is still that human error still tops the vulnerabilities and threats that most CISOs are concerned about. And they're turning to things like AI. I'm sorry to use that buzzword, but they're turning to things.
Look, you went a good 7-8 minutes without using it.
Okay.
Today's world, that's pretty damn good.
But they're turning to technology to help protect the human, right? It makes perfect sense because the technology, if deployed the right way, can keep people from making mistakes. So human error is still the big one, whether it be phishing, whether it be clicking on the wrong thing, whether it be downloading data that they shouldn't be downloading or moving it or sending an email by mistake that sends a lot of sensitive information out there. AI can help solve a lot of that. Gen AI is a big concern, I think, for most organizations, trying to balance that double-edged sword of the positive strengths that you can get from generative, as well as how do you control the genie once the genie's out of the bottle, so to speak, right? And being able to manage that from a risk standpoint. Data loss is probably the third largest issue, and data loss comes in lots of different forms, right? I mean, data doesn't walk away on its own. It's usually purposely sent or erroneously sent. Employee turnover is a big part of that, and the CISOs have again look at AI as a way to try to protect that from a DLP perspective. And And then there's always the board relationships. There's always the concern about liability right now. That's a big one for just the pressures on CISOs. There's so many angles coming at them in their role. It's hard to imagine another C-level officer with the number of pressures that are coming at them other than maybe being a CEO yourself.
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, before doing this interview, I was taping our Techstrong Gang segment, and we spoke about, AI and cybersecurity, for instance. And here's the good news. The good news is help's on the way. It seems like every vendor, from large vendors like Palo Alto and IBM and Cisco and so forth, to startups, are harnessing AI to try to force multiply, if you will, our protection profiles and so forth. On the other hand,
right.
On the other hand, the bad guys ain't stupid, and they don't sit around waiting for their board of directors budgets to come through, and so forth, right? And they just do, and they're using this maybe faster, better, quicker than our security vendors are.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that at RSA just a few weeks ago, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's not going away. It's going to do nothing but increase. But the reality is Proofpoint's been using machine learning, and generative AI, but machine learning and AI for years. It's been the core of our business, and you have to use machine learning to protect the algorithms, to protect the email, and hence why we're able to protect the large volumes and percentages that we do. But yeah, it's a big concern. And kind of back to the CISO report, when you look at it, there's a lot of things they have to be concerned about, and it's all simultaneous, right? It is the bad guys and what actions they're taking. It is you mentioned, either reduced budgets or maybe frozen headcounts. If you look at the resources that they're under, it's not like the CISOs, and we learned this in the report this year, are feeling like they're getting more resources or more help. In reality, they're having to kind of trade in and trade out what they're doing to try to protect the environment that's constantly changing.
Mm-hmm. I will say that's kind of across the board in IT, right? We want 25% more with 25% less.
Yeah, true.
And that's a hard equation. The math doesn't always work like that.
No.
And I think we're running into that. But look, let me play devil's advocate for a little bit. When did you ever see a report where CISOs didn't feel at risk? When CISOs didn't say, "Oh, I've got enough budget. I've got too many security tools." They may say I have too many security vendors, and we're certainly seeing that, right?
Right.
But this, and take it. I've been in the security industry a long time, so I don't mean to be throwing rocks, but aren't CISOs kind of the boys who cried wolf, maybe?
Hard to say. I think to some degree it depends on the industry, because I think there's been a lot of that maybe have been more resources than others. And I don't know, it's hard to say, because the reality is you're only as good as the last incident. You're only as good as the last thing that occurred.
But here's the problem with being a CISO. Yes, you're only as good as the last incident, but you're not only as good as the last incident that you prevented, because no one knows you prevented it.
It's the crime.
And that's always been the problem in security, right? No news is good news, but no news is no news.
Well, one thing actually we're trying to do and I always refer to it as the crime that never occurs. We're working really hard at Proofpoint to put technology in place, to your point, to prevent the things, but then be able to give the CISO the ability to be able to quantify and communicate what their technologies and teams have been able to avoid, right? And try to put some quantification around it. So you're right. You're only as good as the last one that never happened. But that's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of the business.
It is. Got to get used to it.
Yep.
There's always something in a report that surprises you, Patrick, that, hey, seems counterintuitive. Didn't see that coming. Anything here that kind of jumps out at you that way?
It did a little bit. One of the takeaways we had, I got to look at my notes here. It said that most CISOs are more fearful of cyber attacks. 70% felt at risk of experiencing a material cyber attack in the next 12 months. So that's a big number. That's up a little bit from last year. It was 68 the year before and 48 the year before that. So it's still rising a little bit. But with that concern, or fear is maybe the word, they feel more prepared. They feel like they're in a position to deal with, respond to, address, mitigate those attacks. I'll take that as a ray of hope, right? So yes, the risk is increasing, but they're also feeling more prepared to deal with them and respond to them. So I was a bit surprised to see that. So kind of flies in the face of the cry wolf thing a little bit. But maybe it means that some of the work that they've been doing over the last few years and the partnerships we've all had across the industry are paying off.
Well, so here's my take on that for what it's worth. I think we take both of those metrics, right? The 70%, but yet they feel more prepared. I think a part of this is the realization that we've come to in this industry that no matter what we do, short of unplugging from the internet or something, and even then they'd find a way. No matter what we do, we're not going to totally prevent material cyber attacks.
Never.
Right?
No.
We could try and we could thwart, but we're probably not going to just totally prevent material cyber attacks. And as a result of that, the balance, the pendulum has swung more to the response rather than prevention aspect of cyber defense. And I think we're starting to see that really kind of in spades now, where organizations feel better prepared to respond because they know it's not if, it's when.
Oh, absolutely. And that's been a term for a long time. So they're spending more money on things like DLP to prevent stuff from going out the door.
Yep.
They're spending more time on education and training because they always feel that if you can protect the human, you'll protect some of the risk on the front end.
That's the weakest link.
Exactly. But they're also they want to rely more on AI, like I said, and they also want to rely more, frankly, on ransomware to cover risks and mitigate risk on the back end. So it is a before and after kind of thing. It's a front door and back door. But you're right. You have to focus as a CISO on that full spectrum.
Yep. I don't disagree. Here's the bottom line for me. It's still hard being a CISO. And one of the things we saw last year is, CISOs with criminal charges, CISOs with SEC kind of charges. And, it's a hot seat. And it's always been a hot seat. Patrick, you know that. I mean, the fact that you were at one place for 10 years is probably kind of up near a longevity, record.
Or it shows a lack of intelligence, maybe, but either way.
Well, could be that too, yeah. But, the average CISO is an 18-month lifespan. Something like that, I think, is what the numbers show. So it's not an easy job. And quite frankly, in today's AI jacked up environments, it's not necessarily getting easier either. It'll be interesting to see the 2025 Voice of the CISO report, what's changed as a result of this, because the other thing is things are happening so quickly. I was at RSA too. We were sitting on Broadcast Alley all week. We did our DevSecOps event there on Monday. Things are moving faster. We used to talk about the internet time and crunch time. Well, now AI seems to have crunched that even more, and things are really happening. So, buckle in, strap on, and get ready, I guess, is the mantra.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the expectations of a CISO are not going to go down; they're just going to go up. One of the stats that came out of the report, which did not surprise me at all, was that 68% are concerned about personal liability. Well, you talked about that, but right. 72%, this is a great number, 72% would not join an organization that does not offer D&O coverage. It seems common sense in today's world.
Well, so that jumps out to me, Patrick, is what the hell are the other 28% thinking?
I've asked myself the same thing, Alan. I have.
I don't know if I'd want that job without it.
Yes.
Anyway, hey, Patrick, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for coming up on here. We did mention proofpoint.com is the URL. Is there any specific URL that they can get a hold of this report, or is it just off the
go
front
to the
page?
Proofpoint. Yeah, just go to the proofpoint.com address and click on. There's a couple tabs on top. You click on CISO. You'll be able to get the links there. It's probably even on the front page right now. So
Excellent, man. Patrick, thanks for joining us on Techstrong TV. I hope this won't be the last time. We'll see you back on here soon.
I will welcome the invite again, Alan. Thank you so much.
All right,
Appreciate you taking
anytime.
the time.
We appreciate you and all you guys are doing. Good luck.
Thanks.
Patrick Joyce, Global Resident CISO at Proofpoint, here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with our next guest in just a little bit.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everybody, welcome. Mitch Ashley here with Techstrong Research at the Open Source Summit. As I've mentioned, we have such a variety of topics and folks that are involved in open source. That's one of the real great things about this kind of a conference. It isn't just down one avenue of open source. And I'm joined today by a real special guest, Hakeem Hassif. Yes, welcome. With the Technology Innovation Institute.
Correct.
Good to talk with you.
From Abu Dhabi.
Tell us about the Institute first, a little bit about it, folks may not know about that, and then we'll get into your area of specialty.
Absolutely. So I'm coming from the Technology Innovation Institute, that is the research arm of the ATRC, the Abu Dhabi Advanced Technology Research Council. So under ATRC, we are actually three entities. So we have Aspire, that is the business development and the program management of ATRC. Then we have the TII, that is the research arm of ATRC. And then we have Venture One, it is more into the commercialization and the business side for ATS.
Interesting. So you're kind of at the front end of the research going into maybe things that are commercial.
Absolutely. So the research is done on our side, and then when it's mature enough, it goes to Venture One that does the commercialization and the business side around it. Under TII, we have 10 research institutes and we have a variety of technological areas. So we have, for example, the robotics, we have crypto, we have biotech, we have space, and then we have the AI, just to list.
This is AI. There, you get to the AI, which is your...
Which is my
What's your title? What are your responsibilities there?
So I'm the executive director and the acting chief researcher currently. So I'm leading the efforts around generative AI and specifically on building or improving the Falcon model that is coming from TII.
Fascinating. I've got a lot of questions for you. A lot of things I'd like to learn from you.
Sure.
And thank you for doing research in this area. A lot of folks are grappling with not really understanding LLMs. Do I need to develop my own? How does that fit into my own software development cycle?
Sure.
Should I just rely? Should I look at the very large LLMs, or maybe I should look at small or domain specific? How do you kind of break down that area of generative AI so that people can understand this is the right path to go down under different situations?
Yeah, so you have different perspectives, of course, when it comes to the LLM, but there is one thing that is important to keep in mind. Building an LLM is not a cheap operation, so it costs a lot. So starting like with the thoughts to build my own LLM as a developer, for example, may not be reasonable. So to build those LLMs, you need to have millions of dollars, because in terms of compute, it's extremely
Not
deep.
for the faint of heart.
Absolutely. So it needs,
or the underfunded.
absolutely. So usually, so for big entities who want their own LLMs, that's doable. So the data is there. Most of the data is public. They can build their own LLM. But when it comes to the development and to the open source community, I would say, it may not be worth building an LLM from scratch. So taking existing LLMs and then building on top of that by doing some fine-tuning, for example, it is much cheaper and much more straight to the point. So we have actors like TAI who are building those models, the core model, and then we have the developers who can come and then add some specializations of those LLM through the fine-tuning. And then you have all the applications that would come on top of that. So my recommendation is more If you do not have the budget to build your own LLM, you just take the LLMs that are existing there, especially on the open source world. They are accessible. You can see what's going on inside the LLM. It is transparent. Take one of those, build, get your data, fine-tune it, and then build your application on top of it.
I think many of us know about Hugging Face as a source for LLMs. Is that the best source for open source, or kind of individual projects are the right?
Yeah, you have a lot of actually locations on the internet that are sort of providing those open source. Hugging Face is something that we have been using now for long, but you have small projects that are coming on. There is a huge diversity actually where you can get those LLMs. You have also the hyperscalers like AWS that are offering those models. So you have different parts on the internet where you can get those models.
Fantastic. I was having a conversation with kind of DevOps architect person earlier, talking about we seem to be in the era of more co-pilots than you know what to do with when it comes to generative AI, which kind of seems like the entry level for adding AI, generative AI, to a product or technology. What do you see as the next evolutionary step that companies would take if they've gone down the chatbot or the co-pilot route?
Yeah, one of the things, the needs that are there all the time, and we need to find a solution for it, is basically the reasoning capability of these models. So nowadays we are more into this generative dimension, where the model is able to generate either text or image or a video or a sound or something like that. But you don't have really a huge reasoning capability. So down the road, this is absolutely critical for all the applications that we are building. And if you want to get the LLMs within the critical infrastructure, the reasoning has to come there. So this is why most of the community around the LLMs is exploring this path to find ways on how to integrate this reasoning to make sure that the LLMs will not just generate content, but somehow they need to think before they generate the content.
Does that help with, hallucinations on one end of the spectrum, but also more deterministic outcomes? Because there are situations where there may be a lot of probable outcomes, but I need kind of reliable
certainty. Yeah, we need a lot of certainty. And then, what we see today is mainly the model itself. But we believe that the model itself is not the only ingredient to solve all the problems that we are facing today. So we need to build an ecosystem around those models that will help actually understanding better, for example, the prompt of the user, right? So the model itself alone may have some understanding, but you need to build around that some small applications, small systems that will be actually helping into decomposing the prompt to build a sort of a better understanding of that.
What is that part of, I don't know if you consider it training, but is that part of engineering what kind of prompts to expect and how to respond to them? So, how to interact with it either interactively or through an API.
So you can do that, but you have also another part that is basically, you have some parts of the prompts that could be understood better by an external system, right? So using, for example, knowledge graphs. So you can reason on the prompt before even you send it to the LLM, to rewrite it and do this kind of stuff. So the model itself may not be the answer for everything, but the ecosystem that will be built around that will be actually supporting and improving these models. And I will not be surprised, to be honest, of these proprietary models, because we do this comparison, sort of a straightforward comparison in terms of quality, saying, the closed models are much more interesting in terms of quality, but as a matter of fact, we don't know what is hiding behind those closed models, right? So, and my intuition says that, you don't have only the model that is behind that. So you may have an ecosystem that is composed of the model plus different small applications, small subsystems that support actually the LLM to reach that quality that our closed source models are reaching today.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's maybe for the folks that are newer to generative AI, the assumption is that, hey, if I can take my own unique data that's specific to my business, you train the model or build that into an LLM, that's one of the ways that I can do something that's differentiated from by competitors, for example. But it isn't always necessary to go to generative AI route. I mean, you can do other things, ML, other kinds of vector systems.
Very good question, actually. So most of the people, I think they have extremely high expectations from generative AI. They see it as a solution for everything. I do not necessarily agree on that, because you have problems today that you can still solve with traditional machine learning, right? So I think everybody is going this way because there is also high expectations from it, and there is also, I guess, some wrong marketing that is done around.
Very high visibility, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I used to call that the airline magazine phenomena. Like, my boss read this in the magazine on the airplane, so we must need to do it.
Absolutely. So everybody wants to integrate that. The use cases, honestly, most of the use cases as of today can be solved by the traditional AI. So there are some use cases that become interesting. Either, for example, the call centers use cases, interesting enough that it's a chat, it's an interaction. So you can integrate a lot of generative AI. You can have things in parts of the healthcare system, the legal system. So you can have many things that you cannot solve with the traditional one. But when it comes to, predicting the weather, probably you don't need to integrate straight away the LLM.
We already have non-deterministic models for that.
Exactly, that's the thing. So getting these models into production will still take time. Getting them into critical infrastructure will take time. It will happen, but it still needs some time in terms of research. And the generative AI is not sort of the answer for all the problems that we have. It will come at some point where it will solve some problems, some critical problems. But probably we don't need to deploy a monster like an LLM just to solve a simple predictive task at the end of it.
So don't rush down the generative AI path just because it's the new shining thing.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of
totally agree.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, I'm really interested in, we're trying to increase velocity of how we deliver software, improve the security of it, be able to respond to both business needs as well as security, whatever it might be. How does introducing AI into that workflow work? Because AI depends on data, but in its own unique way, as opposed to a traditional database or data resource we might access. What are the unique characteristics of AI, whether you're doing AI, ML, or generative AI, as you're thinking about delivering it with other software, either at the same time or at its own interval?
I think one of the domains that we'll see a sort of a big impact when it comes to generative AI is the software industry. So, but I don't see it as replacing completely the way we are doing today, the software like productization and these kind of things. The LLM is actually learning from data that is out there, generated by someone. This someone is the human.
It was human written.
Absolutely. So in terms of efficiency, things would be much better. I think AI would be helping out there. But when it comes to security, for example, there is a need to have humans who will be involved in there. So we will be delivering much faster, better quality stuff. But when it comes to critical situations like the security, especially the security part, I think we still need to keep the human in the loop just to make sure the machine is doing the right thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to auto co-pilot quite yet.
Not yet.
Let me ask you kind of a theoretical question. Do we create a feedback loop that's kind of non-productive if at some point we have so much generated software available to train models against that we're actually, the LLMs are using not human-created software, but AI-generated software. Now we have AI generating more AI-generated software on top of it. Does that create a kind of bad feedback loop?
Well, if we rely on the studies that have been done so far, one of the studies that our colleagues have done in the research center where we are, this generated data is not actually adding a lot of value. So this is why
it already exists out there. Right?
Absolutely, and then you have a sort of a phenomena where actually a system is generating things, and then it generates feedbacks and things that it has generated. So everything becomes artificial, and then you need to measure actually how close that artificial thing to the reality, right? So if we keep like the system generating data and then evaluating through feedback that data, probably it will completely lose its value, that feedback loop, right? Again, this is why we need the human to be in the loop.
Right.
At some point, AI is good, but having it fully sort of independent may not create value, actually, I think.
I think of it as kind of the two mirrors on opposite walls that you see kind of the infinite
into
the...
Absolutely.
Okay. At some point,
you feel that you are doing things, but you are not adding value at the end of the day, actually. And then you may even like theoretically like reach to a point where you are changing completely what you have learned in the model, because it starts learning on things that are superficial at the end of it.
What's your thoughts on general intelligence, AI reaching that point? You hear, the next version of ChatGPT or whatever, we're this far away from that happening. What's your view on it?
I think there is an interesting progress that is going on. But honestly, I'm not confident that we are close to this gentleman. Right? So we're still, I think the AI is still at its infancy. We do not really understand completely what's going just inside the neural network. We don't know how it works, right? So you have a few papers that came out like a few days back. We have spent time building huge models with billions and billions of parameters, right? So the papers and this research work has demonstrated that with 50% less parameters, you do exactly the same you reach exactly the same quality that you reach with 100% of the parameters. So we still do not understand much things inside. And again, the fact that these models are able only to generate, not really to reason on things yet, makes us a little bit far from having an AI that is, I would say, that is taking over the world. Right? So we are not there yet. Maybe 5-10 years down the road, we reach to that point. And maybe the path is not necessarily the LLMs. Maybe it's something else.
Could be something else. Netflix has introduced the idea of the three-body problem to people of three objects in space influencing each other, that you can't create mathematics to predict what will happen with those things. Is that do we face that problem with AI, that we may never really ever be able to understand how it's determined what the outcome is?
I think there is progress. There is a hope that at some point we will reach that understanding. But for that, we need a sort of an interdisciplinary approach. So we need to have people from different perspectives working together to analyze and understand the limitations, and then eventually the frontiers of the problems in which we are. So probably it will take time. It's not an easy problem, but there are a lot of people working on that around the world, and things are going extremely fast. If you look at the statistics, the level of adoption of this AI and the interest, the number of papers we see coming out every week is extremely huge. So this maybe gives a positive hope. I would say that we will progress quickly on these kind of problems, and we will build quickly a better understanding. Maybe not the full understanding, but a better understanding pretty fast on that thing.
Good. What problem is capturing your attention right now? What are you thinking, working on?
Well, we have the reasoning. We look at this pretty closely. We explore it in different ways, from different perspectives. And then we have the safety and the bias of these models.
Big topic.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah,
exactly. Like the previous generations of these models, we have been focusing on building the model, like demonstrating to the world that we can build the model. And I think all the folks who are working in the area of the LLMs were trying to demonstrate the same thing. We can do it. So now we have done it. But we never thought about the safety, right? So
just because the Wright brothers could fly doesn't mean we're all going to jump on board.
Absolutely,
and go someplace. Quite yet.
Exactly, not yet. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's an important problem, and it's time to look at this safety issue, because we are reaching a point where the quality is increasing, quality of these models is increasing, and there are some use cases where we can integrate this technology. So, and the integration comes with safety. If there is no safety, there is no integration anyway. So it's important to look into this. You have the bias. So the bias, it comes mainly from the data, in my opinion. And the data that we are using today is mainly coming from sort of one location of the world. So maybe it's interesting to look into how to get some cultural sort of minority also considered in this kind of model and have their word to say somehow in this.
Fascinating. It's been a pleasure talking with you about it. I feel like we could go out to dinner, have drinks afterwards, cigars, talk about this for hours and hours. I've enjoyed doing that. So
thanks a lot.
Hakim Hassi, very nice to meet you, and appreciate your work and research and helping advance the state of the art and solve those work on those tough problems.
Absolutely.
With a lot of other smart people.
We'll continue. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the discussion. And I hope we will have an opportunity again.
You bet. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
So where are you going to hear a conversation like this, right? You don't walk up to the water cooler and suddenly bump into a Hakim every day. So it's a great pleasure and a privilege to be talking to folks like him. We'll be back with more interviews, so stay tuned with us on Techstrong TV.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hello, and welcome to our Leadership Insight series. I'm Amanda Rosani, and I'm here today with Rodolfo Rossini. He is the CEO of Their Computing. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Can you share a little with our audience about Their Computing and what are the services that you provide?
Fair Computing is a British-American company. We're based in London, Cambridge, Seattle, and Sunnyvale. And we founded in 2021, and we're working on what comes after the end of Moore's Law. Moore's Law is one of those things that gets talked about and a lot. Moore's Law, in theory, is something that which is basically the idea that you can shrink transistors, and that allows to make faster chips and faster computers. The common wisdom was that Moore's Law was going to be over in the late 2030s. But recently, there's been an analysis of the problem. It turns out actually Moore's Law will probably be over in 2028, 2029, give or take, right? At that point means we still can shrink transistors, but we're not going to get faster computers. So at that point, classical computers, as we know it, will cease to deliver performance. And so there's going to be a Cambrian explosions of alternative architectures, right? Some of which you've heard, like photonics and quantum, analog, and so forth. There's going to be like really dozens of them, right? And I'm working on one of them. And of course, while everyone will say exactly the same thing, in this industry, we think that the one we're working on is the one that actually will scale for decades to come, and it will become sort of the physical and logical successor of Moore's Law and deliver computing for 50 years. So this is sort of what we're working on. And obviously, when it comes to in terms of workload, we're focusing on AI computation because we think that right now AI is the minority of compute, right? You have like classical things like databases and everything, right? That will not go away, but we're going to have this enormous amount of compute coming online, and sort of like we are preparing our chips for that world. And our focus is mostly enterprise, the industrial, defense, sort of like very and OEM for consumer electronics companies.
That is so interesting. It sounds like that turning point isn't that far off, and a solution is needed pretty quickly then. So can you share what is your solution that you're working on? Are you able to share any details of that? And how soon would it be available, or what is the goal for availability?
Sorry, I'll give you the short answer first. I'll go into detail. So we call it near zero energy chips. And by near zero, we mean a chip that uses almost no energy, but more importantly, does not dissipate heat, right? And so it uses 100% of the compute available, but it's still not hot to the touch. And the availability, we are looking at probably having test chips later in the year. And I would say general availability for customers probably 2 years from now, with the shipping at scale probably 3 years. So not incredibly short term, right? In this, but with these architectures, some of them we're looking at decades sort of before they can reach. And we do this because we're cheating this process in the sense that this technology, the first chips were taped out, which is a term for manufacturing chips, were taped out by MIT in the 90s. So actually, this is already like 30 years of research and development on this technology. In terms of the specifics, right, when we call near zero energy chips is something that we came up with because the technical term is a bit of a gobbledygook for most audiences, which is adiabatic resonant reversible computing. And unless you're an expert, it doesn't mean anything, right, to you. And essentially, what it means is so the top line is reversible computing. So that's sort of the I would say the underlying technology. And reversible computers are essentially they're self-explanatory in the sense that they're computer they can run computation forward like a normal computer, but also they can run computation backwards. And this is where most people sort of like start asking, why would I ever want to run a computation backwards? Well, the answer is you don't. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's not very important that you can run a computation backwards. But from the law of engineering and thermodynamics that were established by the Carnot father and son at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, sort of they described that everything that is reversible is much more efficient than something that is irreversible, right? This is the concept that is very, very well understood in mechanics. Think of an internal combustion engine where the piston goes down and goes back up, right? Where you basically recycle. The reversibility allows you to recycle the energy more efficiently, essentially. So when they're called, from an engineer perspective, they're called reversible. But really, they should be called recycling computers, right? Where essentially close to 100% of the energy that goes into a chip ends up being wasted as heat. This is why chips get hot, right? So instead of having energy being decay into entropy and being dissipated as heat, what if you prevent this from happening? You keep the energy internally, you recycle it, and so from the outside, it looks like it's using very little energy. When in reality, it's exactly the same energy, it just recycles internally. So basically, this is like a recycling chip, but it's just in order to do this, the engineering of it is actually non-trivial, right? And so this is why, and there are many flavors. To add the complexity of this discussion is the very beginning of the reversible computing research. Someone a couple of professors had designed a gate, right? Sort of like the basic logic function, which was not dissipating any heat or making any noise, like a perfect, right? And the quantum computing people sort of saw that and said, oh, this is amazing. We can use it for quantum computers. So quantum computers are actually irreversible, but it's a different way. And so essentially the idea that Moore's law gave us 50 years of sort of irreversible classical chips that are super hot, super fast and everything. And now we're at the tipping point where in order to continue, everything has to be sort of this reversible for increased efficiency. And this will be, will appear in the market in different ways, right? But our take is that in 15 years, this will be the underlying technology of every new chip, right? Whether you're aware of it or not, that's the different matter. But
that's so interesting. I know that that's going to be pivotal when it comes to carbon footprint. I know many business leaders are concerned about the amount of energy being put out in the atmosphere and the heat levels. So if you're saying this reduces the heat and it reuses that energy, so it's a smaller carbon footprint, correct?
So there is more to it, right? So one, of course, is the carbon footprint right now. So it's not quite a carbon footprint, right? So the way that we see this is right now, close to 100% of the energy ends up being wasted as heat, right? And so you can build more data centers, you can build more nuclear power stations attached to them, but simply what you're doing, you're basically pumping energy into the atmosphere as heat, right? And so scaling the energy actually makes things much worse. The thing that matters is how efficiently can you convert energy into information. And that's the real bottleneck, right? That we're trying to solve and other companies are trying to solve, right? And the secondary effect is that the moment that you improve this, then yes, you can improve the reduce emissions, right? But we think that over time that will not be really a big deal, right? And like if you really go, we're getting like clean energy, batteries, solar, hydro, nuclear, right? I think the problem in data centers is not so much the energy, it's the water. So right now, I don't have the latest, but think of something like 50 to 57% of the energy, the water in the data center is actually potable drinking water, right? And that is filtered because of corrosion, but sort of like it's treated, but it has to be super high quality water, right? And of course, you're putting these things in places like Arizona or in places where you don't necessarily have water, or the same water is to be contested between the farmers, the other industrial users and everything. So, and in the case of drought, like you can't really switch off the data center, right? So they need to have priority to access further water. So the problem is right now, yes, it's CO2 and emissions, but long term is the water is the number one limiting factor on because of course it's not so much that this is computed that it's in a vacuum, right? The AI compute creates GDP, creates wealth, so creates a better economy. So this is like all these positive effects. So it helps transition, right? So if actually by improving that we destroy our water sources, then it's a problem, right? So we see water as really number one problem. Okay, and I'll go further on this. Right now, the reason why the data center has these massive boxes is because of heat. And if you actually could change the thermals of this, you would actually redesign completely the data center. So it would not be this massive monstrosity. You could do it much smaller, much more efficient. You could put it like in an urban environment. You would not use water. So like all these like second order effects actually they are much more interesting.
Okay, so I have two more questions just from what you've shared so far. The first is, so you mentioned that quantum computing is another solution being looked at out there, and it also has some of the similar reversible technology. So where does the difference lie between quantum computing and your technological solution? And are they both viable, or why are you discrediting quantum? Is it just too soon to look at quantum? Is that way off in the future? Or?
Yeah, so maybe discredit is too harsh, right? Because I'm actually a believer in quantum and alternative architectures. It's just I disagree with the quantum guys on the timelines of this. I think there is a healthy dose of overpromising and obfuscation on the actual performances, right? So the way we see this is that our world is built on classical classical deterministic computing, right? And that's sort of like, which is, you pay a fine, a database is updated, someone dies, the database is updated, and you want to book an airline and a web page is generated, right? It's sort of like all deterministic computing, and that's sort of like our foundation of our thing is. We are trying to extend, and we think this is the market today, right? 30 billion chips a year, or whatever you want to call it, right? And trillions of dollars of value existing. And this cannot stop. If this stops, this is a disaster from a GDP growth perspective, right? So our goal is to continue and extend this growth of GDP so we can continue doing that. What other branches, and photonic also in this area, right? What quantum computing and other branches, other analog computing and all these things, what they do is they create new branches and new computing opportunities, right? Where, there is this thing which we're not computing today because it's incredibly inefficient, right? And the example of quantum computer is probably protein folding or factoring a prime number. It's like there are these things that might be obscure, but actually, if it becomes easy, we could discover that they're plentiful and they're new things. So if you ever played video games like Civilization or stuff like that, where you have tech trees, right? So these technology open up new branches, and they're super interesting for these new branches. But what they're not telling you is that they're actually super slow if you try to solve a classical problem, right? So, like, I've yet to see someone from the quantum computing industry that makes it clear that quantum computers are super slow, impossibly slow, in the slowest that you can think of, imagine, except in these use cases. And maybe there may be others, right? So yeah. So and the other thing is, I think there are some issues with quantum computers in particular. You need to create and maintain this perfect environment in which to perform your computation. That's very energy intensive today. I don't think it's going to be in the future, right? I think in the future we're not going to have a near zero Kelvin computation and everything's like super cooling, and maybe we could have our room temperature superconductors. So it's like, what I'm saying is that in order for quantum computers to be viable, we have to make multiple breakthroughs. Each one might be as transformative as the invention of the airplane and the microprocessor and then. So it's sort of like suddenly you start stacking of these, and maybe decades might not be enough to have these computers.
That's understandable. So another problem I hear about is manufacturing plants to make these chips. So what is the solution to the ability to actually manufacture these said chips?
So this is the geopolitical issue of the day, obviously. And I think we're just in the beginning, because basically Taiwan has almost the monopoly on the top end of this, and sort of the world's trying to play catch up, but it's hard, right? Because we see sort of all the manufacturers and the Taiwanese are really good at this, right? And for what we're trying to do is we're not going after the latest technology, right? And by latest technology we mean going with the smallest transistors possible. Right. Our thesis is that maybe we can build differently, right? Changing the logic. Now we know a lot more about semiconductors and theory information than we knew 50 years ago when these chips were designed. Because the chips. So one thing is important, maybe not obvious to your audience, right? In software, it's super common that you rip out everything and you replace a piece of the stack and you change everything if you look at sort of tech stacks, probably they change every 10, 15 years, right? Of course, there are people still running Fortran and somewhere, right? But roughly speaking, like database technology, everything is improved massively over the decades, right? And you can replace the entire thing. In the semiconductor industry, roughly everything has been very evolutionary, where marginal improvement. So what we're building today is not conceptually that different of what was built 50 years ago. It's just the same thing with like tiny engineering improvement rather than ripping everything out like a Band-Aid and they're starting from scratch, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And so we think we can do something different, right? And instead of having to chase the latest technology, using older technology, 10-year-old technology, which doesn't really have the same issues and super cheap to manufacture at scale. So that's sort of where our thinking lies. However, I think the concept of fabrication will be probably the hottest geopolitical issue of the next decade, right? And suddenly everyone will know everything about where is the Strait of Taiwan, what is TSMC, and what is ASML, which is the company. Because basically right now there is one company in the world that makes lenses, that is Carl Zeiss, which sells into one company in the world that makes the machines to manufacture chips, which is ASML, which sells into one company in the world, which is what TSMC Taiwan, to make this chip, which sells into one company in the world, which is NVIDIA, to make the chip. So you have like these stacking monopolies, right? And the moment that there is, one warship in the Strait of China, suddenly you don't have an iPhone, right? And so this is like very, because everything is just in time, right? And so this, I think, will be common knowledge in 10 years and everyone will know everything about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look at some of the supply chain issues just recently from a few years ago. And, being that it's all a monopoly, one block in that bottleneck stops everything and is a real concern.
Yeah. And so let me ask you a question. If you look at your work, your career, the previous years, right? When was supply chain really a big deal? It was never really, no one really thought about this until recently, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it is a key concern. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your insights into this fascinating and very important technology. Do you have one key takeaway that you could leave our audience with today?
Yes. So I think the perception of what a computer will change dramatically, right? So if we travel back 20 years ago, right, or actually if you travel 50 years ago, I ask you what a computer is, and you think, okay, a room size thing, right? 20 years ago, I ask you what a computer is, and so, this thing on my desktop, right? And today, what a computer is, well, this is thing in my pocket, right? And with the reason why this is two things, right? One, more computing power, and two, reduce energy consumption, right? And particularly energy consumption is the important part. If we continue this trajectory, right, and we continue reducing energy consumption, which is possible with our technology, by several orders of magnitude, you end up with a chip where with a computer that can run AI calculations that does not require a battery, right? And can only use capacitors in environment, photovoltaic or something, or radio, but uses such a ridiculously small amount of energy for computation. And suddenly it changes your imagine traveling 50 years ago and telling people, this is my supercomputer, right? Well, no, this is like a tablet or something weird, right? And so this is, and this will allow new devices that today we don't think they could exist, right? And so I think this is like, think of these, the trajectory of energy efficiency and miniaturization, and where is AI taking us? I think it's like a fascinating future.
Yeah, I think we're in a new technological revolution, and it will be interesting to see what the future holds over the next 10 years.
Yeah. But thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for tuning in today.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, Mitch Ashley here at Atlassian Team 24, having some great conversations. I have the privilege of being talking with someone who is in the DevOps advocacy with Atlassian. Andrew, how do you say your last name? I didn't. Voyaggi, okay, fantastic. So you've been with Atlassian a couple of years. You were a practitioner before that, right? Doing DevOps and using Atlassian technology, right?
Yeah, so before I joined Atlassian a few years ago, I was an executive manager at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where I led quite a large platform team over there for a few years. And then I joined Atlassian as leading the DevOps evangelism team. So I speak to customers and I work with our product teams on topics like developer experience, developer productivity, and platform engineering.
Very nice. How do you engage with the community? Is it kind of your job to evangelize, or do you get called in with customers or prospects and kind of help us understand how we solve this certain problem?
Yeah, there's no 2 days the same in the life of an evangelist. It's a mixture of those things. So locally within our community in Australia, I run a platform engineering meetup, but I also am heavily involved with the rest of the Atlassian community. I do get called in to speak with customers and engage with them on things they're seeing and help they need in terms of platform engineering as well. So mixture of ways that I get involved.
You know, it's interesting when you have lived in a DevOps or platform engineering world, you start to get in this bubble of thinking the whole world's like that, when not everybody is either that far along in adoption or maybe even started doing that kind of thing. What do you think comes first? If people say, I've got these tools and now I want to figure out how to do DevOps or platform engineering with them? Or are they starting like, we want to move to DevOps and platform engineering, and what's the technology that would help me best get there? Is there a pattern there at all?
Yeah, you said everyone, we think everyone does do it. I think everyone should if they do it.
Everyone should. Oh, of course, absolutely.
I think the pattern that I see the most is everyone is already using some developer tooling. So I haven't come across any engineering teams who are not. But I think it gets to a point where complexity starts to play a role in their ability to develop software. And there comes a time where teams hit the complexity limit and they just realize that they need something to be able to go beyond this limit, and something that is going to help them continue to deliver high quality software at a good speed. So I think a lot of people naturally get to the point where they realize they need something. Sometimes they don't know that it's a platform, or sometimes it might not even be a platform. But I think everyone starts off with DevOps tooling, and then they get to this limit where they realize they need something to boost them beyond that limit.
Yeah, so sometimes that complexity just can be, how much can we really mentally understand and keep in our minds at one time? Because it gets to be so big, you can't conceive it all together. So dividing those things up into smaller parts of work, even if you're not going to a cloud native, being able to automate that so things will flow faster. And you know how the automation works. You don't have to know how every piece along the way works. Is that where people start, or do you see it more of, I need to do more agile kind of thinking around how we're delivering what we're doing and planning our work, and it's sort of a JIRA kind of approach? Where's the complexity first solved from? Not that there's one answer to every question.
No, I think that you raised such a good point, because a lot of companies I speak with try to solve one side of complexity. So there's intrinsic complexity. So that's the complexity associated with being a developer. So needing to know how to use different tools, needing to know about cloud and all the different things that the modern day developer has to know about. And then there's extrinsic complexity, which is more around the company that you work in or the industry that your company operates in. So for example, looking at my own history in banking, there's a lot of regulatory requirements associated with banking, and that introduces a lot of extrinsic complexity. But solving only one isn't really looking at a total developer experience. A developer has to traverse both types of complexity. So really, when you're looking to solve that complexity, you need to look at it completely, look at the whole picture, and solve both sides. So yes, there's the tooling side, and to be honest, I feel like that's the easiest side to solve. There's some existing patterns that companies can use to solve some of that intrinsic complexity. But the extrinsic complexity is really around processes and governance and all that friction that comes along with the company that you actually work in.
It's interesting. I started in banking also in my career, and sometimes there's a lot of momentum that we have in the way we do things, right? Because it's worked for us, so we've got it working. And sometimes regulatory things get blamed, if you will, for, well, that's why we have to do that. Well, no, actually, there's other ways we can accomplish and satisfy that requirement. Just what we're doing now currently does it. And so it takes a little bit of, let's step back and kind of think about how we might solve the problem a little bit differently. how do you help people kind of get unstuck from, not that they're not stuck, but how do you kind of open up the possibilities of, if you're going to take a DevOps approach, how you might adjust what you're doing in those processes and things like that?
Yeah, like I think something that I've always done and encourage people to do is really question the requirement. So, an anti-pattern when working with engineers is just giving them the output that you want, or the requirement that you've got, without any context behind that. And I do see that a lot happening with regulatory requirements, where they say, we need to do this thing because the regulator said we have to. And I used to encounter that quite a lot. And I spoke to the regulator, and they're like, we didn't say that. That's not what we need you to do. So it's similar to building a good product. You need to understand the actual requirement and the context around that. And then I think empowering engineers to actually meet that requirement is the way to get unstuck.
Yeah, sometimes we mix up requirement with our implementation of it, right? And it sounds crazy. Something that's worked for me is, let's think of the opposite way of we're currently doing it, and what would that enable us to do? Not that that's the right answer, but kind of opens up that space to say, well, actually, hey, this is a really great way to solve this.
Yeah, like, a good example is with governance of software teams, right? Normally what happens is there's a governance team who's in charge of making sure that an organization's expectations in some certain aspect of software delivery are met. And the most basic way they do that is to set up a meeting and a process where everyone follows this process, and they come to that committee and say, here is evidence that we've done everything that we need to do. Another way that you could do that is by using scorecards. So scorecards is a feature in one of our engineering products called Compass, our platform.
Compass, yeah.
And with scorecards, you can reverse that and make it governance on demand. So you embed requirements for all teams into a scorecard, and during a delivery cycle, teams can see, are they meeting those expectations or not? So it makes it easy for them and avoid rework. Whereas for the governance teams, they don't need to have this meeting where everybody comes in and explains to them what they've done. They can filter for scorecards to show me the ones that are not meeting our expectations. And then they can reach out to that team or those teams and have a different type of conversation. They can say, look, this isn't where we need it to be. What can we do to help you to get it where it needs to be? And it really changes the dynamic in the relationship between those teams. So I think that's a good example of changing things around, like looking at things a little bit differently.
Another example of that is, since so much of our workflow, we use automated technology tools to do that. Well, that captures data, right? What do we need to satisfy regulatory requirements? Evidence of we're doing something a certain way that puts us in compliance. And whether that's a workflow or checking security of software when we do a CI/CD build or whatever it might be, all of that data can be surfaced to something like Compass or other tools, workflow tools, that you've got data and provenance of where that data came from to satisfy you much better than filling out a form, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, like I'm sure you've been involved in audits as well, and they are very time consuming.
Show me this, right?
Exactly.
That's the first question.
So like having something pre-prepared, like on demand, to show you, we're not going to just show you one example, we can show you every time we've done this, goes beyond satisfying the requirement of an audit.
I've had more than one conversation. I believe you, but the auditors won't, right? They need something that says, it shows that you did that. So let's talk a little bit about platform engineering, since you ran a platform team. When it kind of arrived on the scene as a term, we'd already been doing it for a long time. Some were saying, oh, that's the replacement for DevOps, or this is, we forgot about the developer, and so that's what platform engineering here is, kind of focus on the developer. And you may say some of those are true or to whatever degree. What's your perspective about how platform engineering and DevOps fit together, complement each other? How does the workflow, what does a well-functioning DevOps and platform engineering organization look like?
Yeah, I've always been a little bit confused about a DevOps engineer or DevOps role. I know it's widely used. I never looked at DevOps that way. I mean, the tooling is one aspect of DevOps for sure.
Because it's a how, right? How you do things, not just a tool.
Exactly. Well, there's a bit more of a cultural change that's required within DevOps, rather than if you just implement a bunch of tools, you can't say that you're working in a DevOps kind of way. So I'm definitely in the camp that DevOps and platform engineering are complementary. I think platform engineering is an excellent way to enable DevOps, because it takes away the complexity of the tooling away from engineers and allows them to focus on what they're actually getting paid for, what they're there to do, and what they like to do, which is deliver high quality software to production. So I think it is difficult to be really successful with DevOps without platform engineering, but I think the two are complementary terms.
Seems like anything that can solve the problem. Well, it worked on my machine, right?
Yeah.
The platform that lets standardize some of those things and make it easier to spin up environments, and whether it's dev test or production is a great thing, right?
Absolutely. I think people do sometimes lose sight of the fact that developers want to be productive. They want to ship high quality software to code.
They don't want to do the drudgery work.
Exactly.
Nobody does.
So, and I think platform engineering is an excellent way to enable that. So we do see that, internally we use Compass, which is our platform, and it does help us drive developer joy, because it takes away some of the mundane parts of being a developer, and it helps them focus on adding value and shipping high quality software to prod.
Excellent. Where would folks find you, engage with you? Is it in the community that they would mostly see you, or where would you find Andrew talking about what you talked about?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So you can find me at LinkedIn, Andrew Boyarji, and the Atlassian community. So I'm pretty active in the DevOps Atlassian community as well.
Great. Answering questions, helping out.
Yeah.
Giving feedback.
Writing articles, answering questions.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Well, thank you, Andrew. It's great to talk with you. And thanks for joining us and sharing. Those are all kind of like, how do these things work, right? I think all of us are trying to figure out, how do we make things better, and is this something that will help us? And
it's a journey for sure.
It's a journey, and we go. You don't do it alone, right?
Possible alone. That's what we say.
Is it go fast alone, go far together?
Exactly.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Andrew's been sharing with us a really great perspective. He has his own background of leading platform and doing DevOps, and now he's helping others doing that through the Atlassian role that he plays. Welcome. Thanks again for coming back, and welcome to this conversation. We'll be back with another great interview coming up real quick.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hello, I'm Krista Maycomber with Techstrong TV, and we are live here at the RSA conference. I have the pleasure of sitting down with Anand Aswal, who is the SVP and GM of the network security business with Palo Alto Networks. Anand, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how is the show going for you so
great.
far? Yeah, I know it's
busy.
Already busy, right? I know we're sitting here actually early Monday afternoon, but the conference is already, as you can see, full swing. And so, Anand, I figured we would kind of jump right into it. So, no surprise, artificial intelligence is a big theme, here at the conference, as it is really kind of in the tech world at large. And I know before we, kind of hit the record button here, you and I were talking about there's definitely a few dynamics to adoption that we're seeing, and one of the components that I figured we'd start with is the fact that as these artificial intelligence applications are being built and coming to market, employees are beginning to access them without the knowledge of IT. It is that old challenge of, kind of this shadow adoption. So can you talk a little bit about, are you seeing that as well, maybe within your customer base at Palo Alto?
First, let me say, look, AI is transforming business. It's adding significant value to every single enterprise. The rate of adoption of AI, the technology, is faster than any technology in the history of mankind, right? If you think of AI applications that employees of organizations are using to increase their productivity. There are thousands of applications available. I read a research recently which said that over 57% of all employees are using these Gen AI applications and tools, whether IT is aware of it or not.
Exactly.
That's happening.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I think, kind of another component that we're seeing is that organizations are not only using some of these, kind of more general purpose AI applications, they're also creating custom AI applications to better kind of serve the needs of their, of their business and of their customers. And there's a whole slew of kind of new infrastructure considerations that comes along with that, things of that nature.
Absolutely. So let's tackle the first one you talked about, employees accessing these new tools available without IT being aware of it. And there are plethora of such tools, right? From tools which are productivity enhancing tools, which will automate your workflow analysis, your data analysis, and so on and so forth. To developers using these tools to write code, to complete code, to simplify code, to automate their workflows, to sales and marketing people. Like, they're using it to write their blogs, marketing emails, generating collateral, and so on and so forth. And we have thousands of such applications coming in every day. And this number keeps increasing. What IT really needs is to understand who's accessing what application and why. Then you need to decide, should I allow this application? Should I deny the application? Or should I limit usage of this application? If you allow an application, you want to ensure that it has secure usage. And you have the right level of controls that you can have only the sensitive data not leak out. But that's a big concern for organizations. Right? And last but not the least, many of these applications are sending responses back to you. How do you ensure that you don't have malicious attacks coming in to your enterprise? So all of this makes it a very holistic solution. So really you want to have visibility, you want to have full access control, you want to have complete data protection control and the granular controls, and then protect your organization from all these threats. That's really what makes it complete.
Certainly not. And we're seeing that as well. I think, a couple of the big considerations, just to echo your comments, certainly are, making sure that the AI application is kind of securely accessing data, not accessing data that may be, from an overprivileged perspective. And as you mentioned, the flip side of the coin too is kind of, maybe especially when we think about generative AI, the content that it's being generated and kind of the integrity and security behind that. So maybe we can take a moment here and talk a little bit about Palo Alto Networks. Can you share a little bit? I believe you have an announcement. So can we share a little bit about what Palo Alto Networks is doing to address these issues?
Palo Alto Networks is having a holistic, complete solution. How do you secure AI by design? And that falls into the two categories we talked earlier about. Securing employees using these Gen AI applications and ensuring that your network security administrator, IT, has visibility, has control, has granular data protection policies in place and threat protection policy in place. Now, the other factor is that every organization is building these AI-powered applications because they want to transform their business. They want to engage with their customers in different ways. And I say AI-powered application is really the third wave of application transformation. Long ago, applications were built on a 3-tier architecture. You had your front end, you had your application, and you had a database. Then came the cloud. Cloud said, let me help organizations now modernize these applications using microservices. AI-powered application is the third wave. And it's not just plugging in a model to an application and saying you're done. You're bringing in entire new app stack, AI infrastructure, AI models, tools and plugins, data sets. And all these are communicating with each other and the outside world. This increases the attack surface. Attack surface from a supply chain perspective, from a configuration perspective, and runtime perspective. So we are basically having a holistic solution, AI security posture management and AI runtime security to ensure that applications that you build for your enterprises are secured by design.
So it sounds to me like it's both sides of the spectrum. Excuse me. So it's, as you mentioned, having that security posture up front, as the application is being developed to make sure kind of that it's secure at the start. And then once it's actually moved to runtime, having that visibility into the threats and things of that nature.
If you think of AI security posture management, it's really about identifying and remediating all the risks you're seeing on supply chain, all the misconfigurations you're seeing, all the awareness that you need to have around sensitive data that is not secured. And then AI runtime protection is around protecting your applications, your models and data from all these new threats that we are seeing in the AI work. If you think of AI-powered applications, they have the same threats as classic applications, but then they are AI-specific threats. Threats around things like prompt injection, which in very simplistic terms is, how does the attacker fool the model to go beyond the guardrails to give you that information that they would not give you in normal case? Information about your training data or sensitive information about your clients. Similarly, you have model DOS attacks or data leakage attacks. All of these need to be thought through holistically when you're protecting your new AI pod application.
Sure. So Manan, can you share about specifically what Palo Alto Networks is announcing here at the show?
Yeah. So 3 products. First, AI access security, ensuring that any user, whether you're in the office, at home, from any device, from managed devices or unmanaged devices, are able to access these Gen AI applications, which help them increase their productivity, but do it in a secure fashion. And second, as organizations are building these applications, how do you ensure that they have the right security posture? So supply chain risks, configuration risks, data exposure risks, and AI runtime security for ensuring that all the runtime threats that we see, they're protected against those. That's what we're announcing tomorrow. Really around how do we ensure that organization secure all their AI usage by design.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I think maybe one topic that we didn't touch on is the fact that, customers are going to be, accessing these AI applications through perhaps their cell phone, through a whole variety of means, maybe an unsecure browser, that kind of circling back to this concept of, shadow IT. Maybe are outside of the control of IT, or maybe just not as secure as we would like.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how the new announcements are going to address that?
Sure. 90% of all successful ransomware originates from unmanaged devices. About 80% of all data breaches happen from applications that you're using in the browser.
Yep.
For the most part today, I'm working in my browser, right? So what Secure Enterprise Browser gives you is ensuring that for your unmanaged devices, you're having complete protection. Complete protection from a zero trust network access perspective, complete protection from a workspace perspective, and all the data controls that you need for your applications you access. And then even for your managed devices, you're adding a new layer of protection to protect these devices from all the advanced phishing attacks that are happening on the browser. The browser is the only entity that sees everything unencrypted. And it's really the right place where you can apply all these granular controls and prevent you from attacks that you've never seen before.
Yeah. And that's very important because we do see that kind of phishing and social engineering. These are still the primary ways, or a very important and prominent way that attackers are, kind of penetrating our networks and our environments and gaining access.
100%.
Yeah.
100% agree. It also helps simplify IT. Today, a lot of times when you're having contractors onboarded, you have to ship them a laptop. And sometimes they're working only for a week or 2 weeks a month, and it's very cumbersome. Or you use tools like VDI or Desktop as a Service, which are, slow and clunky.
Yep.
Secure Enterprise Browser is a very nice, elegant solution to address those use cases, to simplify IT, but at the same time, get all the security controls you get with your SASE architecture. So we have completely integrated them with our SASE offering.
Excellent. Well, Anand, thank you so much. This has been a very insightful conversation. We really appreciate you sitting down with us here at RSA Conference 2024. And we would also like to thank our audience for watching. Again, this has been Techstrong TV, and please tune in for more of our great content coming up here at the show.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everybody. Mitch Ashley here at RSAC 2024 in San Francisco, talking all things security, cloud, endpoint, software, supply chain, you name it, we're talking about it. So I have the great pleasure of being joined by Paul Reed. Paul Reed with OpenText, global cyber
threat intelligence.
Threat intelligence. You knew I was going to mess that up because I already did. Close. So I was in the ballpark.
Well.
So the few folks that don't know, tell us about OpenText. Tell us about what you do at the company.
So OpenText is a company with annual revenues of about $6 billion. They have a very strong background in information management, past 25 years doing that. And because of that, it really gives us a differentiation in the marketplace for our cyber products. It's really hard to protect what you don't know about. So information management is all about understanding where your data is, what's it contain, what's the importance of it. So because we have that background in our company, when we build our cybersecurity products, they're focused on protecting the data and protecting what's most important to these customers.
That is a different perspective when you understand what you're protecting with that depth.
It absolutely is.
Security part.
It absolutely is, because if you understand what your data is, the importance of it, we can help put solutions together that are focused on your needs, right? And if we understand where the data is, plus the proper protections, we can make you more cyber resilient, which is really important today.
Very good. Your role at the company?
So I'm responsible for our threat hunting team. So we have a series of threat hunters that hunt in our customers' environments throughout the world. We look for ongoing emerging threats, and we work with them to keep them as cyber secure as possible.
Very good. And I imagine businesses of all sizes, but especially large enterprise.
That's right. Everything from small, medium enterprise all the way up to large enterprises take our services and, of course, buy our products from OpenText.
Excellent, excellent. So you had a big announcement at SAC. Let's talk about SciDNA.
Yeah, so SciDNA is a really interesting product. It came out of our recognition that there's really a new generation of threats that are attacking our customers, and it's really about the threat actors working together. They're really spending a lot more time doing reconnaissance and open source intel and getting to know their victims in more detail. Part of the reason for that is we've had the shift to cloud, right? We've moved a lot of our workloads to cloud. We store a lot of information in cloud, and we've done a really great job as an industry starting to take care of identity, right? Protecting our identities. So we've done things like picked federated identity providers, right? So I now have a single point to manage all my employees' identities and be able to federate with all the different services and things we use. While that works really well and solves a lot of the identity problems, it presents a whole new set of problems. Now attackers have a single point they could try to compromise. So we see a lot of focused attacks now against those federated identities. And if I can compromise those, then I can take that compromised credential and go to a number of different places.
Right.
So I don't have to break into 3 or 4 different places. I just have to compromise one. So threat actors know that. Obviously, customers know that, and they spend a lot of time protecting that. But threat actors are really getting smart, right? They're working together. They are leveraging each other's tools and techniques and skills. And we really need to start thinking about cybersecurity beyond the endpoint, right? The past several years, we've done an amazing job with EDR and other technologies like our web root technology to take and protect those endpoints. Because really, at the end of the day, that's where the attackers want to get to. But with these new threats, we need to look beyond that. We need to see the cyber horizon. We need to see what's coming at us across that ahead of time. So most companies have some form of threat intelligence, right? We all buy threat intelligence. That's really important. And it does a great job telling us, here's the threat actors, here's what they're doing, here are the ones active in the industry or your vertical, and here's the type of tools, techniques, procedures, and other things they're using against you. What it doesn't give you, though, is the specifics of who is attacking you. So SciDNA tries to answer that adversarial signal threat intelligence problem by telling you exactly who is attacking you. So we do that the following way. We help the customer define what we call covered space. So we say to them, what is the parts of your network, externally facing, that are most important, right? So standard stuff. What's your ASNs? What's your CIDRs? Things like that. But then we have a conversation and go, you also need to think beyond that, beyond the corporate structure. What do you have in a content delivery network? What do you have in hyperscalers? What do you have in other places that have become compromised could be very detrimental to your company. So we extend that protection into those CDNs and those hyperscalers to help protect those workloads, protect that content, so we can see the adversary coming and going.
Interesting. So talk a little bit more about the CDN part of it. It's one thing if you're hosting things in your own, cloud services that you're purchasing from whoever. But once it kind of leaves that into a CDN, visibility into that's pretty hard.
It is.
Tough for a business.
It is. So we work with our customers to understand what parts of the CDN they're using, where their data is stored, what's the IP ranges, things like that. We have one customer who, if they lost their content in their CDN, they'd basically lose business overnight, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're dependent upon that delivery mechanism to get content to their customers. And if they're not delivering content, they're not making revenue. So attackers know that, right? Sometimes it's just not simply I want to steal data, but maybe I could harm you in some way or hurt you in some way. And the other thing we're seeing too is that a lot of large enterprise customers are doing a really good job on their cyber. We hear about all the breaches and all that. We never hear about how well other companies are doing.
Everything worked really well today. That's
right. Exactly right. And no one seems interested in that. But what we're finding is because he does such a great job, the attackers know that, right? If I'm a $5 billion company, am I going to be attacked, or are they going to attack a software part of my company? In that case, we see a lot of attacks going against the supply chain, right? So if I can compromise one of your providers or your supply chain, and you have a trust relationship with them, then essentially I've compromised you as well, and I can get in through that way. Other times, if I want to degrade your company's ability to do business, or if it's a nation state, I want to degrade the ability of the nation to deliver goods and services to its customers or to their partners and other places they may be having geopolitical interactions, then that's just as good as attacking you. So with SciDNA, we can extend that coverage we talked about to their supply chain as well and give them visibility they wouldn't otherwise have.
Interesting. One of the thoughts when I heard the name and then read about the announcement is, in the software world, we talk about supply chain, we're talking about the entire creation process of software and security of everything that goes in it and the tools that it runs on. Same kind of thing with data. We haven't really brought together security and data and information together and thinking about it as one cohesive thing. End to end, how does that secure? You don't bolt it on, right?
No.
Secure it.
No, that's
build
right.
it in, right?
And I think that's, as we start talking about, with OpenText having that background in information management, gives us a different perspective when we think about cybersecurity. And we think about it from a data perspective, right? What data are we protecting? How can we keep it secure? Do you, our customer, know where all your data is, right? So that's why when we have that conversation with SciDNA about your coverage space, we let them think about, do I have stuff stored in a cloud storage device somewhere or a cloud provider somewhere? Right? Because that can be attacked just as easily as your corporate net.
Yeah. How about the, I don't want to say next frontier because it's already here. How about data and LLMs and AI? And, we can't go too long into a conversation without talking about that.
Right. So there's been a lot of great announcements at RSA already in the past couple of days on the next generation of generative AI and LLMs and what that means for our industry. And there's great promise there. There's no doubt about that. At OpenText, because of our information management background, we take that very seriously. So we're already implementing that in our information management products today. So we have a series of what we call aviators that allows you to use generative AI to get more detailed information and more natural interaction with the data to get the information you need. We're working now to bring that to our cybersecurity products. And we're going to do it in a very similar way to what we did with our information management products, right? We want to leverage the information that the customer is providing us, but also the information we're generating as well. We generate some very unique threat intelligence and threat intel. One of the things we're very mindful of is the whole hallucination, right? If we're going to be giving cyber recommendations using generative AI, we want to make sure that we're giving the most accurate and informative information we can. To that end, again, our information management background, is really helping us define how we're going to build those generative AIs and those LLMs. Our data science team thinks about that an awful lot and really spends a lot of time on how can we find the best information possible and deliver it in the most normal, natural way to our customers.
I'm curious too, data in generative AI, LLMs, et cetera, it's not like your normal database or data structure, even unstructured data stores. It's its own thing. We're talking about training models with data. Does that cause any new sorts of challenges, things you have to think about how to secure that?
So OpenText has had products using AI and machine learning now for 7-10 years. So we've dealt with a lot of the issues around how do you take and protect your models? How do you take and protect the data you train from? We have a product called ArcSight Intelligence. So this is a user and entity behavioral analytics product where we learn in the customer's environment what normal looks like. So we have many years of experience on how to leverage AI and ML together, the human-machine teaming aspects of it, to better protect our customers and, of course, protect ourselves from those type of threats.
Good. Back to SciDNA, talk about when you identify who the threat actor is. Are we talking about the IP address of someone who's doing it in the country? That's kind of the normal thing, or the historical answers we've gotten before. Are we getting more sophisticated on trying to determine who the actors are?
Sometimes we are. Sometimes threat actors are really good at hiding who they are. Oftentimes we see threats where we can't provide attribution, but we can tell the customer that they were targeted and how they were targeted, which is really important. So, for example, we recently had a customer who had a supply chain attack. One of their manufacturers was targeted, and we were able to show them using SciDNA the exact date they were targeted on and who targeted them, sometimes why they targeted, right? We see a lot of the geopolitical world coming into the cyber world. Not surprised, we've talked about it for years, but with the current environment we all live in, we're seeing more and more of that. And we're seeing it so much that when I talk to our large customers and some of the nation states we take in support, we can almost tell them within hours that, if your country makes a geopolitical statement on the following things, you're going to see the following threat actors come after you within the next 24, 72 hours. And by the way, they're going to use the following tools and techniques against you, because we see it time and time again. There's a playbook they use that they take and apply every time they go after someone for a statement that maybe their country made. So in doing that, we're able to help protect them better and give them forewarning, right? We really want to use SciDNA as a early warning of attack and early warning of compromise, right? If we can find the signals ahead of time that says something bad's about to happen and we can prevent that something bad from happening, then the customer is much better off than waiting for the attack to take place and finding it and then trying to remediate it.
Interesting. It's almost like before you say something, not that we have this level of discipline, but whichever side of whatever thing issue, comment you're going to take.
That's right.
That side is potential threat actor.
Absolutely.
What you're bringing, what you're stating in the public.
It is. And it's really interesting sometimes just to see how often that happens. And a lot of our customers are surprised, like, why were we targeted? We're not a, national brand. We're not a national name. But, you may supply something to the country or supply something to someone else that is critical for that company to be successful. That's why, right? It's just not the big names that get attacked, but everyone's really a target.
Absolutely. Just relative to how big you are, right?
That's right.
Usually notoriety.
Yes.
What was it about what customers were telling you that led you to believe, hey, this SciDNA, whatever the code name for the project
at the time,
was, that's a thing we should go create and bring into market? What was it the customer said that said that's a need we can fill?
So it was really this need to get visibility beyond the borders. So today there's a lot of standard ways that companies do that, and it's been well known and well practiced. But a lot of times there's a lot of friction to getting that done. We wanted to find a way that was almost frictionless for the customer to get that visibility. And we wanted to have it in such a way that we could take and very easily control the how we produce the results from that. So we leverage our existing technologies we have in-house and some of our existing products, and they fit the bill really well to take and provide that visibility. This is something we've been trying, for the past couple of years, and really spent a lot of time researching and thinking about and trying out in the wild, right? We wanted our product to, face the fire, so to speak, and show its mettle, which it did very, very well, right? I was very fortunate to be part of some of the early beta testing, if you want to call it that, with some early countries and companies, and getting their feedback was absolutely critical. Them telling us that we show them things other people don't show them is a really good validation of what our technology was trying to do.
Right. Do you in your role get into the privacy aspects of information data? That's obviously a very, not as fast as AI, but it's much more fast than regulatory landscapes have evolved in the past.
Yeah, data privacy is very important, right? Open text takes data privacy very seriously, and we have products that actually help our customers protect their data both in motion and at rest. For us, from a cybersecurity standpoint, we believe that our customers' data is very, very important to us. It's what we use to protect them, and in turn, we feel the need and the responsibility to protect their data when they share it with us. So we take the utmost security that we can to protect that data, and of course to protect our results as well, right? When we find things for our customers, we share it with them and let them know what's taking place, and then we let them decide how they want to remediate and deal with it, right? It's not up to us how they want to go about doing that, but it's definitely our responsibility to protect them and show them what's taking place.
Very good. I would imagine in your role, you not only, which is a huge responsibility, help shape and do the threat intelligence around the product and services that you offer, but imagine you come to RSA thinking about, I'd like to kind of keep an eye on some things of what's developing in our industry. Are there any things that are piquing your interest while you're here?
Well, clearly the whole generative AI conversation is important. I think me personally, my background in cryptography, the whole quantum safe conversations that are going on right now around quantum safe algorithms and what does that mean for everyone? How soon is that going to happen? I think that's going to be interesting. I was fortunate to be here when DES was broken at RSA, for those who remember those times.
I was going to say, this is all about encryption originally.
Right, exactly right. That's where we all came out of. So to me, going back to look at what's happening in those is still important. A lot of times, it's really interesting. Myself and my threat hunters will look in a customer's environment, will help them understand their threats. And there's generally a point at which in an attack when we hit that if they had only. right? If they had only had two-factor authentication, if they'd only had separation of duties, if they only had stronger encryption algorithms, if they'd only encrypt data at rest or in motion, right? So when I come here, I'm looking for what's happening in those areas, what's coming next, and seeing how we're solving those problems, because there's still a problem today to solve. A lot of times people ask me, how are we going to deal with the generative AI issues and the type of attacks that are taking place? We hear of all the amazing research that's gone on where now we have LLMs that can dissect malware and tell you if it's malicious or not, and that's absolutely incredible. And then we have customers ask us, what's going to happen when the adversaries start using generative AI to create new attacks and new threats? And it's actually going to be a change, right? The pace and the veracity of attacks is going to change, right? Just like we saw in our threat report we put out this week, right? The malware and the phishing and spear phishing campaigns have increased because of generative AI, right? It's a lot easier now to write a spear phishing email or a phishing email using generative AI than it is to do it by hand. But if you think at the end of the day, how do all attacks take place? They know something we don't, or they leverage something you haven't protected. So a lot of times it comes back to the basics, right? Did you patch, right? Have you put your patches in place? And when you talk to customers about patching, they know it's something they have to do, right? It's kind of like eating your vegetables, right? It's good for you, you got to do it, but nobody necessarily wants to do it.
It's like cleaning the garage.
Exactly. That's right.
I don't always do it.
Right. But one of the most important things around that is there's only so much time, money, and effort to be able to do that. Right. So with SideDNA, we're actually able to say, hey, Mr. Customer, here are the threat actors that are targeting you specifically. They're using these type of tactics, and they rely upon the following CVEs. So it allows them to prioritize what they're going to patch first to match the attacks we're seeing.
I'm curious just to get your reaction about this. We hosted an event here every year called DevSecOps Connect, and this was yesterday that we held it, and it was focused on AI and security. One of the interesting themes that came out of it was, in an evolutionary sense, there's a point of which they're doing testing now of LLMs testing other LLMs, and there's benefits to not the same LLM testing itself,
right?
Another version of itself, but also doing that in a security standpoint, using that to test security of the LLM or software coming out of it. Have you seen any interesting ideas like that? Doesn't have to be that one, but kind of this is kind of unique and novel.
So some of the companies that I follow and talk to are really looking at how they can use that to automate threat posture management, how to automate threat testing, right? So if I can take and have something generative done based upon someone disclosing a new 0 day, but yet we don't know what the attacks are yet. If I can use the power of generative AI and feed it in that information along with this corpus of information it already has, it might give me a head start or a heads up on what could potentially take place. So that ability to imagine the art of the possible, I think, is something that's really going to help us in cybersecurity.
It's interesting. If the attacks are driven by AI, maybe we need AI to help us.
Quite possibly, right? Yeah, AI plus humans, that's the perfect combination.
Right, very good. Well, Paul, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for you and your threat hunters scouring the net. Us all know what's happening, and congratulations on the launch of SideDNA.
Thank you.
Wish you the best with that. So, people doing the heavy lifting, right? Figure out how to keep our information secure. So, Paul Reed, head of the threat intelligence with OpenText. Again, SideDNA, check that out. And the announcement that happened today was as well as the other great security technologies coming out of OpenText. We'll be back with another great interview here on Techstrong TV at RSAC 2024.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong TV. By now, I hope most of you have heard the news that Techstrong is combining with Futurum Group to bring probably the largest end-to-end offering of advisory services and media to the tech world today. We're so darn excited to have this because as I mentioned in my discussions with Daniel Newman, CEO of Futurum Group, really the pieces of this puzzle fit together like a good Tetris board. In that regard, let me introduce you to two people I want to bring on today. First of all, I mentioned him earlier. Daniel Newman is the CEO founder of Futurum Group. Daniel, welcome back to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on here.
Good to be here.
And then joining us for the very first time on Techstrong TV, he's actually co-founder and Daniel's partner in 6.5 Media, right? As well as the CEO and chief analyst at More Insights and Strategy. It's Patrick Moorhead. Patrick, welcome to Techstrong TV for your very first but not last time.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us.
No, I've been really impressed with what you've built, and I'm super excited to leverage all the goodness across More Insights and Strategy, the 6.5 Media, and also Signal 65, our labs testing business.
And here's the really great news, guys. You're going to be able to see a lot of the 6.5 Media right here on Techstrong TV. Speaking of premium kind of stuff, though, 6.5 Media has their flagship event coming up, right? This is the big thing you guys aim for all year. This year seems like it's going to be bigger than ever. Daniel, Pat, tell us about it.
Yes, maybe I'll kick this off. First of all, it's the fifth year running. And what Daniel and I really wanted to do is come up with a unique event that really hit at the thought leadership and strategic nature of what was on the minds of CIOs, CEOs, CXOs, and even investors. Shocker, right? This year's event is about AI. And, you know, as Daniel and I always talk about, 2023 was the early build out, right? Primarily in the data center. And, you know, there were some early applications that came out, but this year's event, we're calling AI Unleashed, right? Which is really how AI is working for enterprises, delivering real value, and of course, the continued infrastructure build out in the data center and on the edge. And we couldn't be more excited.
No pun there, more excited, but all good. Actually, what I love about the 6.5 Summit format is this isn't a bunch of 20-second sound bites clipped off at some show or something, right? These are in-depth discussions with the two of you and some of the leaders of the tech world, right? This year's keynote, Daniel, clue us in.
Yeah, so look, the whole genesis of the 6.5 really was that the tech media and the business media rarely gave top executives across the tech landscape really the platform to go deeper into the business, into what's making their technologies different, how they're serving their customers. And Patrick and I know that as analysts, that it is the voice of the analyst that really drives market understanding. Pat loves to say we are here to educate, to inform, and we are, but we're also here to drive meaningful conversations. This year, speaking of meaningful conversations, we have maybe one of the most exciting and prolific CEOs, Bill McDermott, the CEO, chairman of ServiceNow, and he's going to be joining an esteemed group of people who have kicked off our event. This includes Pat Gelsinger of Intel, Arvind Krishna, CEO of IBM, Michael Dell, the CEO of Dell. And then we had Hock Tan last year from Broadcom. So every year we've brought top CEOs, exclusive in-depth conversations. And of course, on the average, we have 20 plus other CEOs and their direct reports from the world's most exciting companies and startups. So we have companies like Microsoft and AWS, IBM, Salesforce, HP, you kind of go down the list, Lenovo, Intel, and it's so many, and in many cases covering 13, 14 different technology adjacencies. So it's everything from chip makers to applications builders to automotive companies and even regulatory policy and sustainability conversations, Alan. So we love what we've built and could not be more excited to bring distribution of the 6.5 on the Techstrong network. And of course, sharing what Techstrong is doing across our respective networks. That is how we end up with the Tetris board you spoke of, the peanut butter and honey, the peas and carrots. You get my drift.
Yeah. I don't know how many people out there do peanut butter and honey and not jelly, or they like peas and carrots, but it fits together pretty tight.
If you're paying attention.
We're with you.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of different swim lanes, as we call them. I mean, we have, of course, right, AI infrastructure, AI enterprise software, We have automotive, right? We have connected intelligent edge. We have cybersecurity, semiconductors, of course, but there really is something for everybody on what what the listener wants to hear. And we love our sponsors for it. We're super excited.
You can register. It's no cost to, view this. It's available streamed on those days. It'll also be available on demand. And as Daniel alluded to, this year for the first year, it'll be available. It'll actually be on our Techstrong virtual event platform, which is going to allow for a lot more interactivity, folks. You'll be able to chat with other attendees as well as maybe some of the speakers and some of the companies represented there. There'll be additional interactive features of downloadable information, just a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to, bring that whole Techstrong treatment to it. And that is really, when I first met Daniel, besides getting the opportunity to meet Patrick, what really got me excited was, man, what we could do with this, right? And this is going to be a great example of what you can expect in the future from a Techstrong Futurum hookup here, where we're just going to go bring it like you've never seen it before. So again, that's June 11th to the 13th. Daniel, is there a site we could send them to right now, or maybe they could register and get more information?
Yeah, absolutely. I would appreciate if you'd throw it in the show notes below. We have the65summit.com. And of course, follow us on @65media on all of the socials, and there will be links to register there. But couldn't be more excited about the integration of the platform, the creating a more interactive experience for all of our viewers, and of course, sharing this. And we appreciate, Alan, that Techstrong has come to the table and wanting to help share this great moment. The 6.5 and Techstrong are going to deliver tons of eyeballs, engaged viewers, IT DMs, and the leaders of the tech industry are going to be checking out our content June 11th to 13th. Be there.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Joseph George, who's Vice President of Product Management in charge of AI Ops for the BMC division that focuses on digital services and operations. And we're talking about observability and hopefully how it's going to get easier in the age of AI. Hey, Joseph, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to talk to you this afternoon.
I think everybody kind of likes the idea of observability, but for the most part, we're all maybe still doing a whole lot of monitoring and not much observability. And part of the issue has just been that we can collect the data, but making sense of it is hard, and there's too many conflicting alerts. So I think we're about to see some progress with the rise of machine learning algorithms, but where are we on this observability journey?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Michael. It's interesting. Some folks may even think about it as observability just being a different name for monitoring. I've been in the space for many years, and I can tell you that's not true. Ultimately, the problems we're trying to solve are really pretty much the same, right? From a business perspective, you want to make sure your systems are up and running. You want to make sure that if you have a problem, you find out about it as quickly as possible, ideally before your end customers or users call you and tell you about it. And best case scenario, you want to get ahead of them. You want to be proactive, find out about issues, solve them, so you can keep your systems up and running. The challenge, though, Michael, is that the environment has gotten much more complex, right? So when you think about data, tools, there's just a proliferation of data, proliferation of tools. And when I talk to customers, they talk about outage of bridges where they've got all these specialized tools. They bring different teams onto those bridges. There's a term that we talk about in this industry, right? Mean time to identification of problems. And one customer told me that in their environment, it's actually MTTI stands for mean time to innocence. So all these different stakeholders come into these bridges, and it's all about proving that it's not them. But you ultimately have to get to the root cause, right? What's actually causing this outage? And so being able to bring all this data together from multiple tools, tie together, get to the bottom line problem, and more importantly, recommend the action that needs to be taken, that's where technology has changed. That's where AI Ops is coming to the rescue.
how proactive can we get? Because sometimes I feel like the application environments are so complex that they're beyond my ability as a human to keep track of, or even a team of 10 people still can't figure out what's all connected to what and where all the dependencies are. And I feel like I need the machines to make decisions on my behalf, maybe to preempt that. But, people get a little uncomfortable with giving up that control. So what's the balance there?
Yeah, I mean, good point. I always ask customers this question, right? If I'm presenting or in conversations, I ask them about their data volumes. And the question I ask is, do you expect your data to increase or decrease in the future? And every single time, without exception, I think there was one time somebody actually answered that the data volume was decreasing, but they'd misunderstood the question. But as long as they understood the question, everyone said data is increasing, right? So your data is increasing in terms of both volume and complexity. Change is increasing as teams embrace DevOps and much more agile practices. Change becomes a way of life, right? And that's how you're actually able to innovate. And the problem is those IT teams, they don't get additional budget, right? You're not going to get additional resources to be able to manage that. So think of that, multiple systems, lots of different types of data, the environment's getting more complex, and you're not getting additional resources to scale. So how do you do that, right? That's really what it comes down to. And that's where technology, AI and AI techniques, we collectively call the space AI ops. To me, and from what we talk to customers and what we learn, is that it's really existential for IT to be able to operate and deal with this complexity. It's not just a buzzword or a nice to have. It is really a set of tools and techniques that help conquer the complexity, be able to solve those problems, without which, especially with digital transformation, IT teams would have no real answer to be able to embrace that new world.
Initially, it seemed like a lot of folks were skeptical of AI, especially as applied to IT operations. But is it your sense that people's minds are coming around full circle here, because they do see it every day in their lives, and they see various things that are co-pilots that are out there? It seems like it's just more common.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting in our personal lives, right? There's AI in every aspect of our lives. Even if you think about just adaptive cruise control, right? I remember driving in the highway. You drive for 5 or 6 hours. It's a tiring experience, right? And now you're able to drive because the car is doing most of the work, right? Especially if it's a predictable sort of environment. And you're monitoring it, right? You don't want to go to sleep because you have no idea if it's going to work 100%. But it changes the driving experience, right? In many ways, it's similar when I look at it from an IT perspective. These are tools and techniques that make it easier for you as an IT manager or IT leader to run and solve problems in your environment. And ultimately, it really comes down to whether they can solve specific customer problems, right? Customers don't necessarily care as much how the problem is being solved. They really care about the problem being solved, right? What is the use case? Can I get to root cause? Can I really identify and distill through all this noise that I'm getting from all these different tools? And can you point out in real time what's happening, rather than me pulling these bridges and multiple people trying to figure out what's happening? And that technology is working, right? There's no question about it. There's been a variety of technologies that have evolved in the space, especially with the advent of generative AI. Gen AI has really captured a lot of attention. But it's not just Gen AI, right? It's multiple different types of AI techniques that can work together and solve problems around classification, aggregation, summarizing, right? How do you actually get to the root cause of a problem and then summarize it in a human understandable language? And that's not just one type of AI. Typically, to get to the root cause of a problem, you're employing graph techniques. You're looking at knowledge graphs that are doing correlation in terms of time, text, topology, and relationships of different assets in the interface, in the environment. And then imagine the power of applying generative AI, taking that root cause, translating it to something that a level 1 person can understand. And in some companies, level 1s don't even exist, right? So it's really empowering the changing environment, the changing IT structure to be able to make decisions more quickly.
Do you think IT will become more accessible to a broader number of folks, because I won't need these huge teams to manage everything? I mean, I'll still need people, but I can do it at a level of scale that just democratizes a little bit of this in a way that enables more organizations, other than the largest enterprises, to build a lot of software at scale.
Yeah, I mean that is a really good question, right? We always talk about increased productivity, and with all these technologies, we talk about all the free time that we have. I don't think any one of us has free time there, right? I think the reality that happens, Michael, is over time, resources can start focusing on what's value additive, right? The types of things that are mundane, that are time consuming, those types of things, you have tools that help you do that. And now you're actually focusing on what's important. How does IT become more of a competitive differentiation for the business, right? How do you support agility? That becomes the way you operate, right? So I think at some level, there's probably a restructuring of who does what, but ultimately it's about making sure your IT employees can work on what's most differentiating for the business.
What is your sense of what comes next for AI? I mean, you guys have pretty much been working on generative, predictive, and even causal, and there's lots of different AI models that are out there that have to get stitched together. Can we do that in a way that's tied to an automation framework to execute some of these things? Because I feel like the AI only goes so far. I need something that actually allows me to put on the proverbial autopilot.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Michael. 100%. In fact, with our platform, with the BMC Helix platform, automation is built into it, right? It's all about how do you actually distill through all this noise, get to the root cause, figure out what's happening, making recommendations, right? And making recommendations, figuring out what actions to take, and then taking those actions automatically. And that automation framework is already built, it's in place. The question is, how much do customers trust and turn it on where they can just let the machine do the work? What we see in practice is it's a process of adoption. So while the technology and techniques are in place, customers need to get to a point where they can see the automation working. They typically track it. They make sure that it works and solves their problems. And then at some level, they can turn it on and say, every time you see this type of issue, go ahead and run this automation in response. So that's a process that happens typically. The key thing that's important here, Michael, is just in terms of data, right? Ultimately, when you talk about AI, AI cannot function without data, right? The data in many ways is the oxygen for AI. And you have all this data by itself, as we discussed earlier. The data by itself is of no use. You need the AI to make sense out of it. So the two go together very much in sync, right? And that's how you get value in an organization. And so ultimately, you need to have platforms that can bring in and support huge amounts of data. Scalability is important. In many cases, you're dealing with problems that you haven't seen in the past. We started talking about monitoring. In the old monitoring world, it was a very simple problem, right? You were looking for known issues. You typically defined ahead of time, these are the types of problems I'm going to look for, right? You had certain metrics, you had certain thresholds, and anytime those were violated, you had rules in place, raise an alert, take the action. So life was much simpler in those days, right? Today, you can't do that. You've got much more complex environments, dynamic environments changing with Kubernetes, microservices. You've got pods scaling up and scaling down, right? It's constantly evolving as well. So in those types of worlds, you need to make sure that you've got platforms that can scale, bring in huge amounts of data, different types of data, not just events. When you think about observability, that space has evolved. It's not just about events and metrics, but it's about log data, traces, and topology, relationships between different assets. And then imagine tying to that service management data, changes and incidents and tickets. Think of this scenario. If you've got a scenario where you understand that there's possibly 3 different culprits for a particular problem, 3 different devices or routers that are potentially culprits, but you know that one of them changed over the weekend. Guess what? Which is probably more likely to be the culprit? So think of bringing change into that equation as well. That's what becomes powerful, right? So as we look at this world that we live in, and it's about bringing new types of data, new ways of processing that data, and then solving problems in ways that we didn't think was possible before.
So are we moving down the path where the future of an IT team is going to be a mixture of agents that I can use to observe and agents that I can use to execute alongside all us human IT folks? And we're going to, my agents will interact with your agents, or we may interact with different people at different times, but the team itself is just, an amalgamation of AI and humans.
Yeah, It's interesting. I think the lines between AI and people start to blur at that point, right? You get to a point where those are tools, right? Throughout history, we've used technology, we've used tools. We use tools to be able to do our jobs better. Some of those tools become just part of the products that we use, may be embedded, and you may not even be aware. In other cases, you're actually very much controlling how it works, right? And I think you're going to have the whole range of those technologies. From our perspective, what we look at is how do we make sure we deliver a platform that's scalable, can bring in different types of data, and be able to provide not only recommendations, but also take the actions out of the platform itself. So from a customer perspective, it starts to simplify, right? They can still have multiple tools in place, but you've got a way to integrate, to be able to orchestrate across those different tools, and to have a platform that can help solve these problems in a much better way than before.
So what is that crisis moment where people wake up and go, yep, we got to move forward. We got to kind of get on this activity, because it seems like there's a lot of inertia built into our workflows. There's a tendency just to keep doing things the same old way. What pushes them forward?
I think that crisis has already happened, right? If there's companies out there that are ignoring it, then it's at their peril. At this point, these are technologies that are here to stay, right? They will evolve. There's no question about it. We think about generative AI. We're probably the beginning of this whole new evolution that's happening, in many ways, a revolution of how we use these technologies. And so they will evolve. And my recommendation to companies is to start looking at it. And if you haven't, you're probably coming late to the party. And it really comes down to, how do you operate more efficiently, right? I talked about how environments getting more complex. When you think about businesses being digitally transformed, there's less tolerance for any sort of outage or performance issues, right? If you don't address them, guess what? Your competitors are going to be out there. They're building those into their systems, and your customers are going to go there, right? So this becomes a very important way of not only dealing with the complexity, but also being able to start creating services, start differentiating from your competitors. As I look at how AI is going to be leveraged, there's always a question, right? Is AI going to replace our jobs? What's going to happen? And I remember a quote from Eric Brynolfsson. He directs the Digital Economy Lab at Stanford. There was a question put to him of, will AI replace lawyers? And his quote was that it's going to be lawyers working with AI that replace those lawyers who don't work with AI. In many ways, I think it's the same thing in our IT technology as well. Those that embrace AI, those that embrace products and technologies that have AI built into them, are going to be the ones that are successful. It'll be survival of the fittest.
So last question. Do you think that we have limited the amount of software that we're able to deploy simply because the IT is too complex to manage and it's become a self-limiting equation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And back to survival, the ones that can solve the problems, right? The ones that can be agile, that can maintain their practices, that can be least capable quickly and efficiently, but also be able to maintain governance, be able to retain and ensure that their systems are up and running. Those are the companies that are going to be successful. And that's what we see, right? With the power of AI, it's being able to deal with a world. Think of a world where you're putting changes in, and the AI can automatically look at data, understand what's happened when you applied changes similar to this in the past. Did you have outages, right? What was the impact? What's the risk? Being able to proactively predict the risk of those changes. And you understand the ones that are deemed pretty straightforward, you just operate and let them go through. The ones that are more risky, maybe there's additional due diligence you have to apply. Imagine that world where human being and AI are working together, being able to deal with this dynamic world where changes are happening, and the process doesn't stifle innovation. You have the right level of process to work with the innovation and agility that you need to survive.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Hey, if you don't enjoy doing it, outsource it to the AI folks, right? They're going to help you and they'll work for you anyway, and you just keep all the fun stuff for yourself. Hey, Joseph, thanks for being on the show.
It's been a pleasure talking with you this afternoon.
All right, and back to you guys in the studio.
and welcome to the latest edition of the Techstrong.ai video series. I'm your host, Mike Vizard. Today we're with Dr. Nicholas Mattei, who's professor of computer science at Tulane University, and we're talking about inductive reasoning, which is really at the core of all these Gen AI platforms, and the good, the bad, and the proverbial ugly, as they say. Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. How's it going?
Good, good. I think we all kind of sat there and when these things first came out and we were amazed in the wonder of it. But for folks who are kind of playing around with AI for a while, I mean, inductive reasoning's been at the core of it, a discussion that's been going on for a long time. And maybe all we ever really did here was throw a lot of computer hardware at the problem. But what is your sense of what's going on here with Gen AI as you kind of look at the history of AI, and what are the, pros and cons of inductive reasoning?
For sure. So this idea of inductive reasoning is really sort of the basis of a lot of what we're doing with, machine learning, and especially with the current Gen AI is all built on some of these ideas from machine learning. And the idea of inductive reasoning, right, is that if I show you enough examples, then you can generalize to identify objects or do whatever, right? And so for machine learning, that's sort of the core way that it works, right? Is that we're going to use data from the past or data from the examples that we expect to see, and we're going to use that to sort of understand and then classify or predict the world. And so for Gen AI, especially in these videos and the images and the text, we're really just predicting the next word. And so I think one thing that folks that can get lost, I think, in using these sort of modern, the new AI techniques. I guess they're not really new. They've been around since the 50s and 60s. We just have a lot more money and, like you said, a lot more computing power now. Is that the places that the things that we learn are only ever going to be as good as the data we have, right? And so this is kind of this catch-22. So a lot of times we'll try to repurpose data. You look at some of the generative text AI models, and what they're doing is they're taking data from the internet, right? The way that folks have used language on the internet, the way that folks have used language in books and things like that, and they're using the past language we've used to generate or predict new language. And that's, I think, a lot of the cases where some of these things can happen, where some of these sort of ethical issues can kind of crop up, is because, the way that we've talked about things in the past or maybe not the way we want to talk about things in the future. And so that's kind of the joke that I've been using recently, is this idea of like sort of original sin, right? Like we've kind of like, we've used everything that we've already done in order to sort of make the new things that we want. And sometimes we forget that that's an inherent, part or possibly even flaw of the process, depending on what we're doing. And this is not, super new. There's a great book called Automating Inequality that really talks about the same kind of ideas, right? Is using past data or using data from other domains or other distributions in order to predict the future. And if your data that you're training on doesn't really match the problem that you have or the problem that you're trying to predict, that's where a lot of these issues can come from. So when we're trying to like guess what, you or I are going to watch on Netflix tonight, turns out that what I watched before is pretty indicative of what I'm going to watch in the future. But if we want to talk about something like school admissions, or we want to talk about something about hiring practices, depending on what data from the past we're using, it's going to influence, by definition, the predictions that we make. And I think that's where a lot of these kind of traps or these ethical issues do crop up.
Are we thinking these things are smarter than they are, and maybe we're going to get in trouble? Because when I look at it, they're probabilistic, so they're taking a best guess to something, but I feel like sometimes we're applying it to things that are inherently deterministic, and then we're wondering why things went wrong.
And that's a really good point too, right? And so during the old AI boom, which predates even me, right? So there was an AI boom in the 80s all around expert systems, around these decision-making systems that were trying to formalize knowledge and then make, like you said, these deterministic diagnoses. In a lot of cases, it's a lot of medical technology in the 80s. The kind of the gap there was that we could sort of write down all of our information and then use that to like reason about the future. And so now we really take all this past data and we use that, and as you said, to make a probabilistic or a prediction about the future. And that's the other kind of flip side of the coin for these machine learning methods, is that they are just making predictions at some point, and they're inherently noisy. They're almost always noisy. These large language models for generative AI are probabilistic distributions over the words you could use. And that implies that sometimes it's going to guess wrong, right? It's going to have a distribution that's going to give you a word that's maybe not quite right. And these machine learning models are really best suited for places where if you get one of these predictions wrong, the consequences aren't that high, right? So again, going back to like Netflix or Amazon, if they recommend a product to me that maybe I'm not so interested in, or if YouTube recommends me a video that maybe I'm not so interested in, there's not a lot of downside to that. There's a little bit, but not a ton. And the places where we can get in trouble is when we start using these things to predict things like who should get credit or who should be eligible for housing or who should get hired, where we want to be more confident in the decisions that we make. And we got to really investigate that probabilistic nature of these models. And so it works great in some cases, but sort of forgetting again, that these are sampling from distributions. Like sometimes they're going to be wrong. And try to apply that philosophy to high stakes decisions or really important decisions, I think just without paying attention to the underlying technology is really a recipe for problems.
Some folks are starting to say that less might be more here because we're overtraining the models and they're getting confused, and that's where all the hallucinations come from. So maybe we should just be playing with a smaller amount of well-vetted data before we just decide to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah, I think this is so my joke on this one is, I work with a lot of folks in different disciplines in economics and sort of across the spectrum here at the university. And the machine learning, computer science, like what we're all sort of trained for is, more data is better, right? We're just gonna pump everything in. We've got all this computing power. Let's just more on the data side. And when you go talk to, some folks more in quantitative research methods and things like that, they're like, oh, well, but why this data? Like, why are you using that? And I think that's a lot of times questions that we forget to ask ourselves. I'm not sure if I'd call it overtraining. It's just this reliance on this idea that if we throw more data at the problem, we're eventually going to solve it, right? Like eventually with enough data, the computer will figure out what we want it to do and it'll work. And it turns out like this works really well, again, for certain things, like when you have Netflix scale data and you're just trying to predict, sort of small problems. And I think there's a whole other realm of problems that we're trying to solve, which maybe, just core machine learning techniques aren't amenable to. They work really well for a lot of stuff where we have a lot of data, and the things that we're predicting are not necessarily super high stakes. But as we're seeing this get applied more and more places, I think some more of the problems that you're pointing to are coming up is that, sometimes you can't just throw more data at the problem. Sometimes you have to go in and understand what's the process by which, maybe a company is making a decision or allocating something, and really try to encode that as part of your whole AI model. And AI has techniques for this, right? Like if we move away from just machine learning, there's all kinds of stuff. I teach the introduction to AI class here. There's all kinds of techniques that we use to try to make the computers do smart things, as I like to say. And sometimes we need to use those. And I think you're starting to see that with the later evolutions of these models, where they're actually not just only using the output of a large language model. They're coupling it with information about the world. They're coupling it with like data from Wikipedia that has some structured data, some structured understanding inside of it. And they're using that along with the language generation to try to, curtail some of these issues about the model sort of making stuff up, because it's really a place where things can go wrong. At the end of the day, these language models, it's kind of fun if you think about it, right? They're trained on a lot of data to sort of give you the next word in a sequence of words. And they're also sort of trained to make you happy as a user. And so the model doesn't want to say, oh, I don't know the answer, right? It's always trying to make you happy, which is like just give you more words that look reasonable. And the problem is when we use these in places where we want to have, concrete, verifiable, let's say citations or references, sometimes it'll just make stuff up because it's like, oh, well, this looks like it could be a reference, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of room, I think, to use the natural language, natural chatting part of the Gen AI, along with, kind of more core techniques in information retrieval, which is what Google is at the end of the day, and using those to kind of combine those two things and sort of check what's coming out of the stuff, right? So it's kind of going to be a hybrid of these machine learning techniques and sort of more standard or good old fashioned AI techniques from across the discipline.
how secure are all these things? And I'm asking the question because there's been some studies recently that said, well, the LLM definitely wants to make you happy, but if you tell it to keep a secret and then you keep asking them what that secret is, it will tell you the secret eventually.
Yep. I think it kind of depends on what you mean by security. I think there's a lot of different levels to that question that folks are interested in right now, right? So one is, are the things that you even put into the text box on, say, ChatGPT or Gemini or any of those, is that private? And I know a lot of places, especially even us here in academia, are running into issues with this where folks are putting personal identifiable information in there, things like that, which is, if I could say one thing to everybody is like, don't do that. Like once something goes in that box, it's public, or has the potential to be public, is not a private conversation between you and a computer. And so don't forget that one. But in terms of secure is it going to disclose parts of the training set, or is it going to disclose, can you sort of convince it to do certain things? Again, this is where I think it's really going to come down to using some of these older techniques for it to understand conversation flow or understand maybe certain parts of it, parts of that conversation, and not just kind of respond to the context that's been built up. So it's kind of an interesting question. Back when I was first doing a lot of AI, I always thought, the stuff that we're doing now which is just sort of model free, we're just going to predict the next word and it's all going to be okay. I personally never thought it was going to work. I'm not going to pretend like I did. And the fact that we get so much complex behavior from these models that really don't have an understanding of grammar, right? There's no little bit inside of that LLM that's like, this is what a verb is and this is what a noun is, right? Like it doesn't understand those concepts in the way that like you and I understand those. Not that it needs to, but it is kind of interesting that we get such complex behavior out of something that doesn't reason in the same way that we do. And I think especially the security question that you're kind of hinting at is, how well is it understanding the context of our conversation? Like, to keep the secret, don't reveal it, in later conversations. It doesn't have this model of conversation, so to speak. And so it's interesting. I'm not sure how to fix that problem. It's a really interesting one. And it's kind of, like a tough one with again, those techniques that are just kind of like looking at the past conversation and sort of generating the next bit of language.
It has the capability to keep a secret of roughly your average 5-year-old. We also see people talking about how the reasoning engines are going to get smarter. There's more parameters and more context windows. And as part of that, though, you can't help but wonder how reliable is that going to be? Because what they're basically saying is we're going to have a bunch of agents that are asynchronously processing tasks on our behalf, very confidently, no doubt. But all it takes is one broken handoff in a process, and chaos ensues. So, how automated is automated going to get?
It's a good question. I think it's impressive where we're at now. If you think back to the late 90s, a lot of the research that was going in that sort of eventually became Siri and some of these digital assistants, right? Like at the end of the day, Siri or Google Assistant or any of these ones are actually handing off a lot of that processing tasks to other programs, right? So when you ask it to play music on Spotify, like it's kind of understanding the request, formulating that, and then handing it off to the Spotify app on your phone, for example. And I think this is this kind of multiple agents interacting with one another. It's been a big research area in computer science for a long time, because I think a lot of folks have thought that this is where it's going to go, right? Like we're not going to build one AI model to do everything. I'm not a big, general AI person. Like really what it is, it's about all these little processes that hand off things to each other and really create a lot of that value. And I think you see this in the products that we have now, right? Like it's something like Google Maps, right? It's a map, but it's also a traffic. It's also a review, right? It's kind of all of these little bits sort of put together into one interface that give you a lot of that value. And I think that's where you look at where OpenAI, their announcement for their new assistant, things like that. That's where these things are kind of going to go. But you're right in that, how those handoffs work and where things get handed off to, like how does that ecosystem work in a robust way? It's not only an AI problem, right? It's a systems engineering problem. It's building a big thing that's connecting lots of parts that maybe don't want to talk to each other. And those are tough problems. It brings in a lot of other issues around, like engineering any big thing. where things can go wrong. And so it's going to be kind of interesting how that develops and how we see the handoffs going between these different types of programs, especially across providers, right? So again, like your OpenAI agent that sort of converses with you and knows a little bit about you, handing off that information to, let's say, Netflix or Spotify or any of these content provider things. What are the problems that could go wrong at that interface? I think is a really interesting question going forward.
So is this turning into like, AI in the Downton Abbey age, right? There's a head servant and a bunch of other servants that are doing all the tasks that nobody ever sees. And hopefully, we won't go broke one day, but it seems that's the way to start thinking about all this stuff.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think that's, if you want to really kind of peel back the top layer, that is what's kind of going on under the hood. And it's kind of interesting. And that conversational, the big advance has been in that conversational layer with these LLMs. And they've kind of surprised us that they can do more than just have conversations. They can do, make predictions. They can kind of interact in relatively complex ways. And then the next level is going to be, how do you sort of get that to hand off to various services and things? I mean, some of this already happens in the background and we just don't even notice it, right? So these generally LLMs are just a straight LLM that doesn't have other services kind of hooked into it. They're not very good at things like math. And so at the end of the day, when you ask Gemini or OpenAI or ChatGPT one of these math questions, it actually doesn't solve that math problem with the LLM. It actually hands it off to more of a calculator type program. And so that's does the simple manipulation. It does things like that. And so we've got, general math software that's been around for ages, things like Wolfram Alpha or MATLAB. But now you kind of think of, you talk to ChatGPT, it sort of formalizes it into a thing that you could send to, say, MATLAB or something else. And that's going to answer some complex math question. And maybe it hands off some of the search to other things. I think you're starting to see this already with the way that Gemini is being included with Google search, and like they're using the search to kind of augment the interface layer or the chat layer, so to speak. But yeah, I think it is moving toward this Downton Abbey thing of like these different agents that do sort of different core things. And then you have your sort of assistant that's talking to you. This is the dream of Siri, right? This is what they promised us like 35 years ago. And we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, I'm getting agents, but no flying cars yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah. Waiting on that.
So last question. We see regulators are starting to wrap their arms around this a little bit. There, at the very least, a few senators have learned how to spell AI, so that's good. But what's your sense of what do we need in terms of regulations? Because some people would argue, we need to let this stuff evolve and see where it goes, and other people are saying we need to closely watch what's going on here because it can spin out of control. And I don't know if there's a middle ground, but I only hear about the two extremes.
Seems right. It's interesting. So a lot of my concerns personally with it are more almost Prosic in a way. Like I'm more worried about, what are the rules around data? Like what are the rules around the things that I put in there? What are the rules around, Netflix, or not to pick on Netflix, I keep doing it. It's because I watch a lot of Netflix. What are the rules around how this data goes in there and how the data can then be used? And I think that's the first one that's going to get sorted out, but it looks like it's going to get sorted out in the courts, right? Between the New York Times and Sarah Silverman and a lot of these folks kind of asking the question, like, where does it go from learning from what I've written before to generating things that are in my, that are replaceable, or even in the New York Times case, like exactly the articles that have been in the New York Times that it's able to generate or recall. And so what are the rules around what you can train with? How close can it be in terms of output? So I think some understanding about that, understanding about who owns the data and what does that mean? I think that's a big question for like people like content creators. Like if you're producing art or you're putting things on the internet, like what rights do you have about, these things taking in and remixing, things like that? Those are all very unclear questions. That I think those are the biggest ones for me. I've always been a big data security, not data security in the sense of, what's mine? What do I own? What are my rights over that? Because I think a lot of that's very unclear these days. And it's a place where if you look at places like Europe, they're a bit ahead of us in terms of guaranteeing rights around data. And I think the other big one is around these questions around like algorithmic recourse. So if you've been, say, denied credit, you've been denied some opportunity because, some computer, made a decision about you. what are the rules around, appealing that process and things like that. So we do have some good rules around this for things like credit, credit decisions made in traditional ways. But that was a long fight, right? That evolved over many, many, many years between the 80s and today. And I think as we've moved some of this decision making into these models, we can't really just let people say, oh, well, the computer said this, so that's the answer, right? Like, as you need some kind of formalized appeals process, especially in these high stakes decisions, into understanding what were the elements that went into that decision and what are your rights as a consumer or a citizen or something like that, right? So I think I'm not a big fan of saying like the models themselves need to be regulated, but I think the inputs and the outputs and where we as users and as citizens and as just people have to interact with those things. What are our rights with respect to those endpoints? And in the middle, we'll kind of figure it out. I would tend to think.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Hey, society is governed by rules and social contracts and norms that we've put in place for centuries. A couple of algorithms aren't going to change that. Hey, Nicholas, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you all for watching the latest episode of Techstrong.ai. You can find this episode and others on our website. We invite you to check them all out. Till then, we'll see you next time.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. I'm your host, Natan Solomon, and this is episode 3 of our series. Today, I'm excited to announce that we're introducing a new co-host to the show. Cassandra Chin is a young tech enthusiast with tons of experience. Most recently, she published a book that helps introduce kids to technology, and she delivered a keynote at DevNexus 2024 in Atlanta. Cassandra, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. I want to talk a little bit about how I actually got started into technology. So when I was little, I would attend kids' workshops on the weekend. These workshops would be about 2 to 3 hours, and it's run by volunteers. So in one of the workshops, it was squishy circuits, and we had Play-Doh, and we connected wires to the Play-Doh, and there were LEDs which lit up. So it was a little bit of an introduction to technology. And later, my dad was also a kids' workshop instructor, and he ran these Raspberry Pi workshops. Raspberry Pis are small mini computers. So they're really small, and they're green circuits. They can run a mini operating system on them. Pretty powerful given how small they are. So eventually I became a kids' workshop instructor when I was 14 years old. I taught Raspberry Pi workshops to the kids. And the special thing about Raspberry Pi workshops is we have breadboards and wires. So we teach the kids how to do some wiring, but they also need to do some coding. So kids get to learn some wiring, some coding, and nano. It's a good balance between both. And I've taught this workshop at many international conferences. So I've actually taught it at DevVox Morocco, JFocus for Kids, and CNCF Kids Day. A lot of international events. And because of all the workshops I've taught up till now, it inspired me to write a children's book called Fitbee's AI Friend. And I think what's important about this book is, when I teach a workshop, I only teach 20 or 30 kids at that time. But with this children's book, I can teach technology to a broader set of children. So even children I'm not interacting with, they can still learn technology and get that exposure they need. So...
Awesome. So, as mentioned, Cassandra recently went to DevNexus, and she sat down with a few industry experts and engaged in some awesome discussions. So today we'll be taking you to the conference where Cassandra talked with Naya Macklin, who is a leader in engineering and developer relations. In this interview, Cassandra and Nyla dive into tech ethics and boot camps. Cassandra, what were your thoughts on this interview and what should we know heading into it?
Well, the first thing is Naya is such an enthusiastic person. Just listening to her voice is very exciting. And she gives us a little bit of insight about how she got started into boot camps. Like, you don't need a big tech degree to get into computer science. She ran through a boot camp and powerhoused it really well. And she also talks a little bit about tech ethics. There's an issue with facial recognition and darker skinned people. So she still really keeps up with these tech issues and ethical issues, and she still presents about it now.
Amazing. Well, without further ado, let's head over to DevNexus.
Welcome to Techstrong Unplugged. On this podcast channel, we'll talk about how younger developers can navigate through this scary world of techness. And a little bit about myself. My name is Cassandra Chin, and I'll be the podcast host. And today we're at DevNexus, so I gave a keynote yesterday, and I'm also a book author, and I've been teaching kids workshops for a while. So today we're really highlighting,
Yeah, Naya.
So, can you do a short introduction?
Of course, yes. So, hey everyone, my name is Naya, Naya Macklin. I am a developer evangelist for a company called Couchbase, and I care a lot about, so I came to DevNexus to give a talk about data ethics, but I care a lot about privacy and ethics and ethical concerns in artificial intelligence, but I also care about making sure that younger developers and developers who are younger in their career have access to this space, right? So given the fact that I too was a boot camp graduate myself, and I came into this field and I thought that, this is not a field for me. I was very scared. And so I'd love to have a conversation with the incredible Cassandra. And so we'll talk about how we can break down some of those barriers for newer folk who are in the field.
I'd really love to hear about your perspective on boot camps, because currently I'm just going through the normal college computer science route.
Yeah.
But I think we should highlight how you can get into the technical world by just joining a boot camp.
Yes, I think that's an excellent route. Oh, thank you. See, you're the best. She got me. She got my back. So, yes, I love boot camps. However, I will say that sometimes there are some boot camps that you might want to be weary of. So a lot of people, they tell you to do your research about boot camps often, and see what other boot camp graduates' perspectives have been with those boot camps. So I personally graduated from a boot camp. It was called Resilient Coders, and it was a boot camp that took lower income folk of color from the Boston area, and it taught them the skills to become software engineers and be competitive with computer science graduates like yourself in the job sector. And so I loved them because they paid you to learn how to code, which is very rare in boot camps. Usually,
I go to college and they make me pay so much just to get a degree.
Yes. It is very, very hard. And I completely understand. So I got a degree as well, but my degree was not in computer science. It was in Afro and African American studies, which some of you might think, like, how does that relate to tech, and why are you in tech? How did you pivot as well? And so for me, I had been working in politics for about 4 years, and there were a couple different women who came to the House of Representatives. I worked at the House of Representatives, and they had come to speak about putting a stop to the use of facial recognition technology by law enforcement, because that particular technology was misidentifying darker skinned people. And so they were saying, no, law enforcement, you should not use this because it might lead to some wrongful arrests in the community. So that's when I said, oh my goodness, like this is such a cool topic. Artificial intelligence is very, very important right now. And thinking about how do we mitigate bias, etc. So that's what spurred me into the field and wanting to become a software engineer myself.
I definitely see that bias, because another strong bias is tech is more of a dude thing.
Yes, that is such a issue. Yeah, people don't even think that women and girls and non-binary folk can have access to tech or should be technologists, but we are. You and me, right? So yeah, it's definitely a bias as well. Yeah, but yeah, we were talking about boot camps and making sure that folk are successful in those boot camps too. And I definitely am someone who says, if you are able to get a college degree in computer science, do it. Definitely do it. But if the degree is prohibitive to you, maybe you don't have the funding or you can't take out student loans for it, then I definitely think take a look at boot camps.
And you mentioned you have some friends who are successful in boot camp too.
Excellent point, Cassandra. Excellent point. So I have a couple friends. They had done a couple different boot camps, and a thing that they were dealing with when they were coming out of those boot camps was that they were very afraid that they didn't know enough in order to come into this field. They thought that, I'm a software engineer, but I've only done this for a couple, maybe 30 weeks, maybe 6 months, maybe even 3 months. And they thought, hey, I don't know enough, so I should not apply for any jobs or any internships or anything like that. And I want to push back on that so much, right? I want to tell all junior developers, you are ready and you are capable of being successful in this field. I definitely want to make sure that you feel supported in this field as well. If no other senior engineers are supporting you and telling you that you can do this, please let me be the first, right, to tell you that you are capable of this.
And I think sometimes you might learn more from boot camps, because in my 4-year college program, the first year is just on Common Core topics.
Yes. Introductory, right? Intro to Java, intro to JavaScript.
Not even that. It's like history, English, math.
Oh, right. Gen Ed requirements.
General education.
Yep. And that makes you a more well-rounded developer, I would say, in some way.
Really, I don't really need it.
True. That is true. Yeah.
I'm more well-rounded just by visiting conferences.
Hey, that's an excellent point. Shout out to DevNexus. But yeah, so I'm definitely a huge plus to doing boot camps if you could do them. And I think that being able to do a computer science degree as well is really, really powerful. So I think my friends would recommend doing boot camps and a computer science degree, whatever way that it takes for you to get into this field. If you're interested in this field, do it. Some people do self-taught, some people do community taught. Those are all different ways to get into this field, and we want you in it as well.
How do you feel about, we're at DevNexus today, and there's a lot of high technical content?
Yes.
Is it easy to just walk into a conference room and understand what they're saying?
Oh my goodness. No. So that's a great question, Cassandra. I think it's so hard. It is so hard because a lot of these concepts, it's jargon. So they're dealing with a lot of technical jargon. And what I like to do both as a developer evangelist / developer relations professional is I like to teach to the center, right? So that term means teaching to, we'll have the more senior people in the field and we'll also have the more junior people in the field. You want to make sure that your more junior people are not feeling left behind when you're talking about a particular technical topic. So just for my talk that I had just gave on data ethics, I made sure to define my terms as much as possible, right? To make sure that when I'm talking to more junior people in the field or folk who just don't know about the topic, that they're not feeling left out.
I think it's not just junior people, even seniors.
Thank you. See, that's why I love Cassandra. So that's correct. There are people who had been software engineers for a number of different years, and they did not know anything about data ethics. So it's seniors as well. You could be the principal engineer. And I think the best senior developers, the best developers, period, are people who are able to be honest about the fact that they don't know a particular concept and to try and learn as much as possible, even when that information is coming from the junior dev or an intern or whoever. They just want to learn. And that's the kind of environment we want to cultivate in any engineering team.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Are there any points in your talk which you think which are relevant, you can kind of bring down to us today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my talk again was about data ethics and how to cultivate having conversations around ethics in your engineering teams as much as possible. So we're on the agile track. So if folk don't know the agile track, it just means being able to do lots of things asynchronously. So doing things at the same time.
Okay, so while you're on it, what is agile?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so agile itself, it's an interesting concept. So there are two different concepts usually. There's, when you're talking about software development, there's agile development and then there's waterfall development. And so for those who might not know, agile development, I'll start off with waterfall development. Waterfall development pretty much follows a particular sequence of steps, right? To start doing something and then you follow a particular sequence until the code is complete or the project is launched. Agile development allows allows you to be more flexible with your development process. So you might do some a drawing of what the application looks like, and then you code out that piece of the application or that feature of the application, and then you can go back to the drawing board as well. If the client or whoever you're building the app for, if they don't like it, you can always come back to the drawing board and redo it fast. Versus for waterfall development, it's like straight down. That's why they call it waterfall, because it's like one way. We're going to do everything in each step at one time, and then we can't ever go back. So
if I wanted to write my own application, maybe just me and a friend, which methodology do you recommend?
Ooh, so if you and your friend, I would recommend doing agile development. It allows you to just be flexible on, for example, if during the later stages of the process of creating the application, you could talk to some potential users of the application, or you could just think of something. You're like, we should have added this. Then you can just add it at that point, and that's a perfect space for agile.
I love the loop of user feedback.
That's right, exactly. Always get that user feedback in your development process.
Do you know where you actually find user feedback? How do you connect to them?
Good point. So user feedback can be found anywhere, really. So it depends on who your particular users are for the application, or your potential users are for the application. So it could even be your mom or your dad or your cousin or whoever is your target audience for your application that you're building. You want to go to them and ask them questions about the application process. How does this feel to you as you're using my application? Is it easy to use? Is it hard to use? Do you understand it? You want to ask them all of those questions, and then come back and pivot and maneuver with your application from there.
Do you have any experiences writing applications?
Writing applications?
Or just working on it?
Of course. So yes, I've been a software engineer for a number of years, and of course a developer evangelist / developer relations professional. But I have built a number of different applications, applications. I used to be a back-end developer as well, so I used to write code in Go and Python. And then I was a front-end developer for a number of years too, so I wrote code in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, et cetera, et cetera. But those are just programming languages for those who don't know as well.
I think that's really great.
Thank you so much.
You have so much experience in different fields.
I'm trying my best, right? No one's perfect, but like I had mentioned before, as a more senior person and just as a developer in general, you want to always be learning and always welcome learning as well in your process.
So once you get out of a developer boot camp, what do you recommend are the next steps?
Ooh, okay. So here's something that might be controversial to people, but I would say, if you're coming right out of a boot camp, you might never feel ready, right? Especially when I came out of my boot camp, I did not feel ready to enter the workforce at all. But I would say, some people say, right, you lose every shot that you don't take. People are constantly learning on the job, right? A lot of your learning is going to happen on the job as well. You're not going to prepare, many people aren't able to prepare for the languages and the frameworks that you're going to use on a software development team. You learn a lot of that because you learn a lot of that process on the job. And as well, because it's sometimes it's closed source, which means that you can't really find documentation for it on Google or anything like that. You can only do that by reading your team's documentation or asking engineers on your team. So that's why I think that the first step should be definitely get yourself out there, know that you are ready and you are capable. You have spent the last couple months you spent the last couple months learning a particular language or framework and know that you are capable of doing this. So go on and apply anyway. You can do it.
So in my college curriculum, we mostly learned Java, C++. So would you limit yourself to only the languages you learned?
No, not at all. Not at all. So when I had gone through the boot camp, I had learned, we had learned front-end development and of course Node as well for the back end. But we had done HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then the first job that I got, the first software engineering job, was writing code in Perl, which is an old programming language. Not many people use it. It's very well known though. But I had never written a line of Perl in my life before I started that job. So I would definitely say do not only limit yourself to only Java or C++ or C# applications. Definitely reach out because they want an engineer who's going to learn on the job, be flexible, and be malleable as well. So that's the best.
I think technology is always moving forward.
That part. That part. Exactly. It's always moving forward and it's always changing. What's popular now is not going to be what's popular in 20 years, right? Perl was very popular back in the day. It's a great programming language, but it is not as popular now. So definitely you want to make sure that you are flexible as an engineer. So just apply regardless.
Do you still find yourself very flexible today?
I do. And I think you have to be, right? Because even right now, you're seeing a lot of AI applications being built, large language models being built, which means that programming languages like Python are really important, right? For building out those things versus you're seeing lots of different changes in the field and what's popular and being able to be flexible allows you to be adaptable to whatever the company needs, whatever the team needs, and you're yourself as an engineer, you're adding another skill set onto your resume, and that is an excellent thing.
I think we covered a lot of important points today.
Thank you. I agree.
So there's a barrier of going to college, but we just broke that.
That's right.
You can go to a boot camp and get started with technology anytime.
Anytime. And both Cassandra and I will always be here to support you as well through that process. We're rooting for you.
Thank you for joining us with Techstrong Unplugged today.
Thank you, everyone. See you later.